Someone's disrespecting you, when someone's coming at you, when someone may be abusive, when you're in a toxic relationship, there are these moments where how do you stand up for yourself? How do you have the confidence to have your own back? So what are the things we can do in our life to change so that we have the confidence in these moments?
So I'm going to start by saying one thing. What you need to know at home is the brain is like the federal government of the entire body. It is driving everything you are, everything you think, every action you produce, every thought you have is driven by your brain. Therefore, the quality of your brain will dictate the quality of your life. Now, what does that mean? It means that we need to have a high-performing brain to be able to fight off negative thoughts, be able to have confidence, be able to know who we are, be able to direct our lives the way we want. If you're at home and you're thinking, I've just had a fight with my spouse, and you're thinking, why can't I control my anger? It could very well just be because you were underslept, or you've been sleep deprived for 5 or 10 years. That's changed the vasculature of your brain, the networks of your brain. It's changed the morphology of your brain. So I don't want anyone to ever think that they are the problem. It could just be because you don't have a high-performing brain. And that's all I do. And it's beautiful, right? Because then you think, Jesus, I can have any life I want. I can be whoever I want if I just train my brain. And that's the premise of what today's conversation is going to be like. Another thing I think is fascinating and comforting is the fact that when we wake up, our brain is primed for fear and negativity and anxiety.
So great.
Yeah, great. So we're not born to be happy. We're not just, happiness is a deliberate effort every second, every minute, every hour. So you have to turn it on. You just have to turn it on. Now, why is this? Let's go back prehistorically through evolution. We, as humans, weren't actually meant to survive past procreation. Okay, let's just say 40 years old, we were actually meant to die off because your brain is responsible for 2 things, reproduction and survival. So that's all it cares about. So it wakes up and...
Specifically for females or for both?
Both. Okay. Even males, okay? Males were not meant to survive past procreation. So that's it. We were meant to die off. We're now living longer through, obviously, the advancements in medicine and science. We were living 50, now 60, now 100 and 120. And your brain is under attack from the moment that you wake up. Just plain sight. So if we are adding to the mix of our brain already being under attack, adding to the mix with people that we hang around, okay? We're allowing what they say to come into our brain. That's one thing. Sleep deprivation. We're taking energy away from our brain. Poor nutrition. We're now also not feeding and fueling the brain. Lack of exercise, which is my area of expertise. How does exercise affect the brain? Lack of exercise, proper exercise. Therefore, I've just given you 4 factors. Pile on top, the brain is just inherently just here to make you survive and reproduce. Of course you don't have confidence. Of course you can't win a battle against your spouse in that moment or other people. Of course you don't feel good. Of course. So your brain is like, imagine it's 3 pounds, okay? It takes up 2% of the entire body's weight, but consumes 20% of the energy. 2 pounds of hard jello, if you will. You can put your fingers in it like this and mix it around, if you will. It's soft, right? But it's a vascular rich organ. Okay, and I don't want to get too much into the science, but your vascular system is the blood vessels that supply the brain with blood. Blood delivers oxygen and nutrients. And it's just working 24/7 just to keep you alive. And if you are not focusing on these factors that I mentioned, the sleep, the nutrition, the exercise, you're really just setting your brain up for failure.
Dude, thank you. That was so epic. Like the foundation of that is so damn important. And I actually have a quote of yours that I'd like to read. You shouldn't be at the mercy of your brain. Our brain should be at the mercy of us. We control our brains, not the other way around.
Yes, 100%. I think we're walking around being driven and dictated by this dumb organ. Okay?
Sorry.
It is. And you know why I say dumb? Because it's like plastic. Now you imagine this bustling city, this interconnected highway of networks. It's flying 24/7, and it will rape you of the amount of calories that you consume, and it is greedy and it's just there to survive. That's all we need to know to start with. Okay, so it's just there to say, hey guys, I'm here for me, and I'm also here under attack. I'm looking for who's going to attack me, and then I'm going to close down everything and deliver the oxygen and nutrients to the body so I can run away from that attacker. That's all it's thinking. So we need to become a bit intelligent. And as women, I'm a female, born and raised, and I have to really, really work hard in several aspects, in different ways that men do, to be able to cater for this.
All right, so let's go down that rabbit hole of what are the things that you have to do, or us women have to do, that's actually different to guys, and why. And then I'd love to really dive into those buckets that you said, so sleep, nutrition, and then definitely exercise, because I want to keep orienting people to why the brain is so important. For me, as a teenager, I was completely insecure. I didn't believe in myself. I had a very negative voice in my head that was always telling me that I was no good. I was petrified to do anything, say anything, stand up for myself. And so I lacked utter confidence. I lacked it completely. And it wasn't until I started to take my health seriously, it wasn't until I started to look at my sleep, look at my nutrition, that actually helped me then wake up the next day, like what you were saying, being able to now almost defend myself from all these negative things that were happening early in the morning. And so it's so important, everything that you're teaching. And so if you don't mind, I'd love to start going deep into what are those things that the women can start with.
So why don't we go down the exercise realm, okay? Because that's my favorite thing.
Yeah.
By the way, the most beautiful part of all of this is the fact that everything is free. Okay? We don't need crazy supplementation regimes. Okay, supplements do come into it, and we'll talk about that. But at the end of the day, we don't need too much to change our brain. The only thing you need is deliberate effort. Okay, so you need to be deliberate about the things that you do. So let's...
Oh, so actually one more thing that I've heard you speak about that I want to orient people as well is I've heard you say, I think it's like after the age of 30, your brain starts to basically atrophy.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. So for everyone at home, so we've probably heard of hypertrophy. This is increase in muscle cell size. So we go to the gym and we want to do hypertrophy to get bigger muscles, and that's great, right? Atrophy is the opposite. It means decrease in muscle cell size. But that's what happens to our brain at the age of 30. And you know, this is a controversial topic, but at 25, that's when the brain's fully developed, which is why I've got 3 nieces, and one just turned 16, and I talk to her about boys. I'm like, don't date a boy until he's reached around 26, 27, because you don't know who he is yet. He could change at the drop of a hat. So we'll keep that in mind.
She's like, at 16, I got to wait another 10 years.
Yeah. So brain isn't fully developed. And then we've got this 5-year gap. I look at my life at 25 to 30, that was the best time of my life. I don't know about you. But then at 30, that's when things start to atrophy. Now, interestingly, okay, I want to bring this up as well. We're born with a genetic makeup, right? Yours is different to mine.
We're both Cypriot.
But that's the thing that's connecting us. We're both Gibrei, we're both Cypriot. Genes are something that, it's like a pact that your body makes with you. So your genetic code says to you, hey guys, we're born, for the next 25 years, I'm on your side. At the age of 25 or at the age of 30, Louisa, you're on your own, girl. You're on your own, and you can switch me on, you can switch me off. You turn my bad genes on, we've got around 25,000 genes in the human genome. You switched my bad ones on, Louisa, I'm going to give you pain. I'm going to give you headaches. I'm going to give you neurodegenerative diseases. I'm going to give you cancer. You turn me down, you and I can have a good life till 85, 90, 100. So we know that. So at 30, brain begins to atrophy. So how do we safeguard our brain? And I want everyone to think about this. Imagine you're going to war at 30, okay? You need to practice. I get so many, young girls like, why do I need to work on my brain? Your brain, you can't see it. People would just want to go to the gym and work on the outside appearances. You need to have a strong brain, just like you have to have a strong body, to fight off when you go to war. What is war? War, in my opinion, is negative thoughts, and it is lack of confidence. You're going to war every day, and you need to be able to fight that battle. So let's start with exercise. How does exercise change the brain and make it better? There's 3 forms that we're going to talk about. There's aerobic, physical activity or exercise. There's resistance training, and then there's neuro-athletics. Okay, so that's my company. That's, I love, that's neurocognitive training.
So excited to talk about that.
So aerobic exercise, that's walking, that's running, it's cycling, it's your long bouts of exercise, right? It's exciting to me. I was an endurance athlete, a triathlete, so I'm used to this, right? What we now know from the scientific literature is that these long bouts of aerobic exercise do many things, not just for our heart, which is our cardiovascular system, but also for our brain. So they did this in mice. The reason why we know this is because what they did was they got a group of mice and they put them underwater, okay? And they got them to, because mice don't like water. So they had to tread the water to stay alive. So they were just treading. And so therefore they were using their cardiovascular system. Then they got them out, they put them on a wheel and got them to run. They pulled a little part of their brain out and they found that they had grown new neurons in a specific area of the brain, and it's called the hippocampus, okay? So they concluded that aerobic exercise grows new neurons in the brain.
Dude, that's insane.
Because we lose brain cells at the age of 30. We're losing them. By the way, you can lose them faster by drinking alcohol.
Oh, dude, we're definitely going to go down the whole alcohol rabbit hole. Yeah,
okay, so I want everyone to stay with me. We're losing, if you're you're just losing it just through natural brain aging, okay? But then, so we're losing it. So then you think, oh my God, we can grow new brain cells, then why don't we all just exercise? It turns out in humans, when you exercise, you don't grow new neurons in the brain, you only grow it in the hippocampus of the brain, okay? And it's because of one specific molecule. It's called BDNF, okay? Brain-derived neurotropic factor. So when you exercise, you release this, and it goes into the bloodstream, and it goes up into the brain, and it's a growth factor. So it helps, it like says to the brain, hey, I'm here, let's grow new neurons. Interestingly, the hippocampus is the first part to go in neurodegenerative diseases.
So like Alzheimer's, dementia, things like that.
Correct. That's the area responsible for memory and learning. That's why we start to forget things. So short-term memory in Alzheimer's disease patient is the first to go. It starts with, where are my keys? What's my next door neighbor's name? What street do I live on? Okay. Hippocampus, which is why exercise is profoundly important for Alzheimer's disease and dementia.
Wow, that's fascinating. I had no idea.
As we age as well, we also have a lower efficacy to release dopamine. Now, I know you know what dopamine is. Dopamine is this neurotransmitter, neuromodulator, if you will, that's responsible for motivation, also rewards. Okay, so when you go out and you achieve a goal, let's just say you want to run 5 kilometers and you go out and you hit your 5 kilometer pace, you reward yourself with dopamine. Okay, as we get older, we just have less dopamine that gets produced. Okay, just from the natural brain aging process. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm to interrupt you. I actually have a quick question about that then. So is it harder than the older you get to then have that amazing response. So like, as I think about alcohol, drugs, gambling, sex, all these things, are you more likely to do it more as you get older because it's harder for you to release the dopamine?
Yeah, and it's interesting because dopamine is also, I think, what we're hearing a lot about is, dopamine being this reward and goal-orientated molecule. It's also a movement molecule because in Parkinson's disease, there's a little area, it gets released in 2 sites in the brain, and there's this little area called the substantia nigra, and this is where a lot of the dopamine is produced. In Parkinson's disease patients, they have a loss of the ability to produce dopamine. So this is why it's a movement disorder.
Oh,
Okay.
interesting.
So in Parkinson's disease patients, what you will see in the first stages, they are, I don't want to move, I don't want to go out. They don't have that motivation and that drive.
So that completely makes sense on the connection there then.
Exactly. So we just have a lower efficacy of this as we're getting older. So putting a structured training regime in place for exercise is going to help your brain in many ways. Dopamine, serotonin, these things that make you feel good, these happy hormones that make us feel alive and bring us into who we are. That's the first thing. Then we've got another thing that happens with aerobic activity. Okay, I always say what's good for the heart is good for the brain, because remember blood flow. Okay, blood flow. I want everyone just to think, how do I get blood flow to my brain? We know we're doing it through exercise. We have this beautiful, we have a heart and this beautiful thing called the aorta. Okay, one of the biggest vessels of the heart. When this comes up, it comes up and we have these arteries that shoot out from it that go to the brain. We've got the carotid arteries at the front, then we've got the vertebral arteries at the back, and then we've got branching off from that. This aorta and these massive arteries actually have muscles around them. So they're muscles just like our body. They've got muscles around them. If it is a strong artery, when it just pumps one and it pumps blood, okay, you're going to get a certain amount of blood that perfuses to the brain. If it's stronger, with just one pump, you're going to get even more blood, right? So it makes sense, right, that we want stronger arteries. How do we train the walls of our arteries? Through exercise. Exercise actually helps you strengthen. It's called cardiac remodeling. You can remodel your cardiac system through aerobic activity, and you create your base of all of exercise. So, protocol, 3 hours a week of aerobic exercise at 65% of your maximum heart rate. Does that make sense?
So let's say someone doesn't necessarily have a heart rate monitor. What would that look like? Could they do like jumping jacks? Like what's the type of push-ups?
Really good question. If anyone doesn't have, and they're thinking like how far, how hard should I be going? This should be aimed at, you want to be, let's just say you're on a treadmill, you want to be working to a point where you can feel it, but you can also have a conversation. Okay, so it's not, it's like, okay, I can feel this, but I can also talk as well. That's when you're probably in zone 2.
And what does the zone 2 mean?
So we have zones of training. Zone 1, you and I are in right now. Okay, zone 2.
This means what? Just sitting on your ass?
Yeah, just sitting down. So, so many different, physiologists will have different zones, 4, 5, or 6. I tend to go into the zone 4, zone 5. Zone 5 would be maximum heart rate.
Okay.
Now, all I want people to do is there's a really great calculation for working this out. So you do 220 minus your age. That is your maximum heart rate. Okay.
Got it.
For argument's sake, we'll say you're 20 years old. 220 minus 20 would be 200. That is your maximum heart rate. Then do 65% of 200.
Okay.
That is the zone 2. Yeah. Correct. So you'd want to be working in that zone for around 3 hours a week. And guess what? It's not hard. Okay. It's easy. You can listen to a podcast while you're doing it. Try and stick to 3 hours a week.
And does it matter how you break up those hours? Like, can it be 30 minutes a day? Can it be 3 hours in one day and then you take the rest of the week off?
I just want people exercising, so
Okay,
what
that's
you
fair.
can do as much as you want. But if we were being really strict, I would say doing 1 hour at a time. Now, I know I'm going to get a lot of questions like, but Louisa, I go for walks. My mother, for example, once a week we'll have an argument, okay, my parents and I about this. I say, Mum, did you do your exercise for the day? Louisa, I was gardening. Okay, gardening is great. Walking is great, but it does not have the impact that I'm talking to you about. There was a Harvard study done on, walking, saying how great it is for the brain, and it is. However, to get the response that we need in order to grow the new neurons, in order to change our brain structurally, we need to be doing these efforts. It's deliberate. Okay?
Yeah, okay, deliberate, love that.
Yes, we love the deliberate. Yeah. So that's aerobic, right? Let's now move on to resistance training, which is, it is my favorite topic to talk about. So,
what up, homie? I got something free and new to share with you right now. How often are you visited by that negative voice in your head telling you that you're not smart enough, that you're not good enough, experienced enough, not fill in the blank? One of the most powerful things you can learn to do in life is to turn that negative voice into your bestie. And I want to teach you how to do that and so much more in my 4 steps to becoming confident workshop. And guys, the most amazing thing is you can actually register for completely free for this workshop. So click the link on your screen and I'll see you on the inside.
During the 1990s, it was all about aerobic activity. That's all we knew when it came to brain health. Then we started to catch on to the fact that resistance training, which is weight training, we'll call it weight training, produces so many more beneficial effects for the brain. All right. So what does it do? It turns out that when you contract your muscle, when you make it smaller through, let's just say a bicep curl, we are contracting our bicep. You're contracting the muscle. What happens is within the muscle cells lives these beautiful little creatures. They're called myokines. Okay? A myokine is just a protein that lives in the skeletal muscle. So they're muscle-based proteins. When you contract your muscles, these get released, they shoot out. Now, some of them stay within the muscle cell, others shoot out into the bloodstream. Okay, they go into the blood and then they go up into our organs. They go to the pancreas, to the spleen, to the heart, and to the brain. And when they go to these areas, oh my God, it is like fertilizer. Yeah, it just does what it has to do. And we now know that myokines can starve off neurodegenerative diseases, cardiovascular diseases, and certain forms of cancer. So we've got little receptors all throughout our organs, and they bind to the receptors and they have a positive effect on them. Okay. We now have, I believe there's around 1,000 different myokines. Okay, 1,000. We really, in the literature, I think we really only know around 100 of them. Okay?
Wow,
yeah,
that's a huge difference.
There's a huge difference. I'm hoping to find a discover one and call it the Louisa. Okay, so go to the gym to produce a Louisa. Okay, so let's stay on this for a minute because it's interesting. It has to do with our heritage. There is one specific myokine that gets released. It's called irisin, and it was named after the Greek god Iris.
Everything comes from the Greeks.
Everything. Listen,
as our fathers, I'm sure, would say.
I mean, I hate to say it, maths, medicine, it comes from the Greeks. Don't at me. But what happens is it's a messenger molecule. It gets released from the skeletal muscle, goes into the bloodstream, it goes up into the brain. So it crosses this barrier. Have you heard of the blood-brain barrier?
No.
Well, guys, we've got one of these, okay? And it's a protective barrier of cells. Okay, so on the outer portion of our brain, we've got cells, endothelial cells, and they're bound together by tight junctions. Okay, so these little cells are like this, which means that certain molecules can't come through, which is great.
It's done. That's for protective mechanism.
For protective mechanisms. Yep. Okay, so imagine a bouncer at a club.
You're talking my language now, girl.
The club is your brain, and it is the most. It is like the Roxbury. Remember that movie, The Night at the Roxbury? Everyone wants in. But the bouncer, which is your blood-brain barrier, is like, I'm not going to let you in. I'm going to let you in. You are omega-3 fatty acids. You can come in. But your cholesterol, I ain't going to let you in. But irisin comes through and it crosses. Okay, now irisin is a messenger molecule because all myokines are messengers, right? They're just little messengers and they come to the brain and then they basically knock on the walls of our frontal lobe and they say, guys, I'm here. I need you to increase your executive functions. I need you guys to increase your decision making, your information processing speed, your learning, your memory. Not just that, it also says to BDNF, hey BDNF, I'm here, go and grow new neurons in the hippocampus. It actually helps it.
Wow, is that why? So I've tried meditation before. I've hated it. I just can't. I haven't been able to get the pleasures that other people get from meditation. But I started to lift weights when I had really bad health issues. And it was the only thing I could do because I couldn't really stand up a lot for long. So I could just basically work out my arms. And since then, it changed the way that I feel about myself every single morning. It's become my morning routine. And I call it my version of my meditation. Is that why?
Yeah, that's exactly why. And imagine this, 80% of brain gray matter is modifiable by exercise.
God damn.
So our brain, when I talk about it, I talk about functionality. Okay, remember those networks I was talking about? How that's the functioning of our brain. How is it functioning? But then there's structural components, okay? So back to the hippocampus. By the way, the hippocampus is this seahorse. You've got two because we've got two lobes. Seahorse-shaped structure deep in the temporal lobes. Okay, the temporal lobes just live here. They're deep within there. And we've actually seen this on neuroimaging. The volume, which is the structure, grows just with exercise. We've done studies on it in humans and in mice. We know that. So the question then is, if we know that, why are we not exercising?
And lifting weights, especially as women.
Yes. Here are my theories. People think that neurodegenerative diseases, Alzheimer's disease, is a timestamp disease, meaning, okay, I'm 75 and I've just been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. Okay, that didn't just happen then. Guess when it started? It started in your 20s, okay? What you do in your 20s and even more what you do in your 30s has an effect of who you will be in your 70s. Which is why I'm like taking my time when it comes to marriage, because I'm like, you know what, I need to know who you are, because I need to know if I want to look after you when you're 75. I need you to have your habits in place by 35, 40, so I know what I'm up against when I'm 75, right?
Well, which you smile and joke, but it's so freaking powerful actually that you said this, because I heard you also say about how much are we losing now money-wise in studies for Alzheimer's.
Oh my God. It will be the collapse. Hear me strong on this. We are losing billions of dollars per year to Alzheimer's disease. And the cost of you also being a caregiver, and that's another thing that's placed upon women, being caregivers throughout time. So there's another thing that we have to deal with.
Yeah, and that's, like, I don't want to dismiss this or go past it too quickly, because there are things where I go, okay, I don't want Alzheimer's. I saw my grandmother get Alzheimer's. It is utterly heartbreaking, utterly heartbreaking. So I don't want that, obviously, for me to get there. But the truth is, especially with my husband, I don't want him to have to take care of me. I don't want to be a lump.
Yeah.
And so my grandmother, she would just spit on the floor and swear, and she was, like not herself. Now with me being very conscious of it, I don't want my husband to have to experience me like that.
Yeah.
And then also, selfishly, I don't want to experience my husband like that. And so if we can all say, what life do we want? Do we want to have this as part of it, yes or no? Because I have zero judgment. Like, literally, if you hear this today and you go, screw that, I'm going to sit on the sofa and eat ice cream every day and just watch Netflix and not do it, go ham. Like, honestly, if that's the life you choose, based on the knowledge, amazing. It's where people may not have the knowledge And then God forbid they find themselves there and be like, well, if only I knew.
And that's what tends to happen. If you go and work, in a geriatric ward, you will see that most people say, just be happy, don't stress too much. And I wish I knew what I know today back then, especially when it comes to health. So that's right. You don't want to be looking after someone. You don't want to go through this. And what you do in your 20s and 30s is going to have an effect on that. So exercise. I used to struggle thinking, exercise, sleep, what is better for the brain? And I solely think the best prescription that's given to Alzheimer's disease patients is actually not pharmacology. It is exercise in the form of resistance training. Now let's go back to women, because,
please.
And I always preface, yes, I am a woman, so I attack myself a lot. Women are afraid to lift weights in fear of getting big. And I have to tell you, stop it. Okay, you are not going to get big. It is so hard. I try to get big doing weight. I'm not getting there. You have to consume a massive amount of calories and protein, and you have to be lifting a lot of volume. So you're not going to get there, so stop it. That's just an excuse. So girls, protocol, what is it? You need to be lifting weights at least 3 times per week. Hard weights. And in fact, if you look at the science, it shows the correlation between brain health and leg strength. All right. And here's another interesting fact. We lose, as every decade, we lose 3 to 8% of our muscle mass per decade. So we're already losing that. Okay. So you have to work even harder to not lose that, but to grow.
And so just to stop you there, that's why I believe that you can eat the same thing, right, at 20 and not put on a pound, and then eat exactly the same thing in 20 years and put on weight, because your muscle mass has declined, and your muscle is what helps burn the energy.
It's a storage unit for glucose. Yeah, that's correct. Yeah. You have to work harder.
And it's specifically, I heard you say quads, right? Like work your quads. Do you know the glucose goddess? Okay, so I had her on my show as well. Love her. She's amazing. And since she's told me about how, like, if you eat certain sugars to help you with your glucose levels, basically do squats. So now, every Saturday, I always have a cookie, like my little snack that I can stomach. I always have some dessert, but then I always do squats specifically. And when I heard you say...
Straight after you eat it?
No, it's usually it's probably better that I do it straight after. But at least I make sure that I do it that day. So that night, I make sure that I do like 100 squats or something like that. And then when I heard you talk about the quads, I was like, oh, I wonder how much those all are connected.
Yeah.
Like specifically the quads. And if you don't mind explaining why.
Your quads, okay, it just comes down to vector size. So you've got quads 4. You've got 4 muscles that make up, this area, the front part of your leg, and they're big. Okay, now what happens when what infiltrates? We've got vessels, but we've also got veins. So every time that you actually contract these big units here, you're contracting these veins. Now veins are different to arteries. Veins are one-directional pumps. So when you squeeze them together, because that's what happens when you work out, you squeeze these veins, shoots up blood to the brain. We want blood, right? We just need that blood flow. And so that's one part of it. But the next part is our muscles contain a lot of mitochondria. Okay, mitochondria we know is the powerhouse of the cell. The energy happens within there. We've got mitochondria in our brain as well, obviously. So therefore, if we grow bigger muscles in our legs, we have more mitochondria as well. More mitochondria means more energy, better ability to fight off diseases, better immunity, better everything, really.
Thank you for explaining that. I love knowing the why to things as well, because it really does help me know in that next time where I really can't be bothered to do the squats, right? Like, I just want everyone at home to know, like, I freaking hate squats.
Yeah.
But once I understand why, every excuse I'm giving myself in that moment, Lisa, you're too tired, it's a Saturday, like all those reasons that could maybe be valid, right? Like, you're busy, you're stressed, whatever, like, give yourself a break. I just go back to the why.
Yep.
Once I know my why, oh, okay, Lisa, what you're doing is you're actually sending the blood from your legs up to your brain. It's helping your brain. You don't want to get Alzheimer's.
Yep.
But like, I just like coach myself in those moments.
Yeah, and here's another really great reason why we need great strength. Okay, I said to you that 3 to 5% of muscle mass, okay, mass decreases. We actually get a larger decrease in strength, and strength is what we need. Okay, let's talk about when you're 80. We can fast track from the age of 80 or even 70. We can fast track our way to all-cause mortality, which is death, through many different ways, but one of them is through falling. Okay, you fall, you break your hip, that's it. You've just fast-tracked your way to death, because you break your hip, right? You go into surgery, your post-operative infections will increase, and just, then you just start to live a sedentary lifestyle. So you don't want to break a hip. But a lot of old people are falling. Okay, my yaya, my grandmother, she fell at the age of 85. Great genes, by the way. She lived until 95, but I saw a massive decline in her, and you don't want that. How do you prevent yourself from falling? Increase stability and muscle strength and muscle mass, especially in the lower body, because that's what's going to like stable you as you walk. So we need that. Also the glutes as well, and everything. Okay, does that make sense? Is that even more of a...
No, I think that's so important. And this is also why I think I post a lot on my social, these older women that I found in their 80s and 90s doing these epic things in the gym, like deadlifting, doing these squats, doing box jumps and stuff like that.
Them.
And the reason being is that it's important to show examples that when someone is like, well, I'm too old, right? Everyone gives that kind of excuse. Oh, I'm too old to do that. It's like, no, you're not. Here's an example of someone doing it. One more thing that I've added on moments where, because since I heard this about the quads and the squats is so important, people are going to maybe say they don't have time. Guys, just do it while you brush your teeth. Like I actually do it when I brush my teeth, because I'm like, okay, well, I've got an electric toothbrush and I know that I can get about 80 squats in with my electric toothbrush. And so I just know, I'm either standing there or I'm doing something.
I'm going to have to argue with you right now.
Oh, please.
Okay? While I am always trying to find a way to exercise, the truth is we need to be lifting around 80 to 85% of our 1 repetition max.
So we can't just our body weight, it needs to be...
Yeah, back to the little pissy weights that girls are using, okay? I'll reference my mother, the poor thing. I always pick on her. Sometimes she goes into the gym and she's lifting these tiny 1-pound weights, and I don't know what she's doing. It's not going to have an effect. Lift hard, lift heavy, and do it 3 to 4 times a week.
Okay, so I need to get a weight...
bulky.
Okay, I need to get a weight vest then. That's my conclusion to doing it while brushing my teeth.
Yeah, actually get a weight vest, and we can go for a hike, because that's a great way to
you're right, because that's not even,
Okay, so we've got the exercise down packed, but then we're going to move on to neuro-athletics.
Yeah, please, this is so exciting.
Neurocognitive training. So your map, okay, let's go back to the city. Okay, every single part of your brain is accounted for. Okay, we've got this little creature called the homunculus. If you look up homunculus, it's like you'll see this outer portion of the brain that's sliced into a coronal section. You'll see this weird looking creature that kind of looks like this. It's like, and it's basically showing you what every part of the brain is responsible for. Okay, so we've got, the reason why is you've got this motor cortex that sits across here. Every part of the brain is accounted for. As we get older, and especially when people retire, you stop using different areas of the brain, right? As we get older, we're not climbing trees. We're not doing, many hand-eye coordination like we did when we were kids. So the brain has this kind of theory, okay? And it says, if you don't use me, you lose me. So different areas of the brain begin to shrink, because we're not using it. So let's also take a bit of a neuroanatomy. I want you to do this with me. Just get your right hand, okay? And just put it against your
everyone
forehead.
At home, come on, let's do this together, guys.
Put your hand on your forehead. It's not much, it's just that, okay? Just here like this, okay?
All right, there you go.
Yeah, so that there is your frontal lobe. And it's about the size of your palm, okay? It's the biggest part of your brain, okay? And it houses the prefrontal cortex, which is known as the CEO. So I told you your brain is the federal government, then this is the CEO of the entire brain. It's the dictator, and it says it's involved in your cognitive functions, decision-making, focus, attention, everything, your ability to think fast, process information. It all lives right here. Okay, then you've got another area of your brain, which is called the cerebellum. It's my favorite part of the brain. It's called mini brain. Okay, it sits at the back, just behind the brain stem at the back of the brain. That's involved in coordination. And we start to, we don't do things with one-legged anymore, as we get older. So when I talk about neuro-athletics training, I'm talking about neurocognitive training, things that are involving every area of the brain. For example, reaction time. And the way that I would tell everyone at home to train these areas of the brain is just get a tennis ball. So easy, right? Very cost effective. Get a tennis ball, start throwing the ball to the wall. Okay, you're getting hand-eye coordination, you're getting reaction time, you're getting visual processing, you're getting everything. The reason why I brought up the cerebellum is stand on one leg and throw the ball. You'll see yourself, kind of trying to balance that. You're training that area of the brain. So you're strengthening it. Okay, so every single part of the brain needs to be accounted for. And in fact, we now know that even hearing loss, okay, or hearing impairment is a very strong predictor of Alzheimer's disease.
Oh,
yeah, so
I didn't know that.
doing things with sound, for example, I do these things with and by the way, I'm doing these with the most elite athletes in the world.
That's what I was going to say.
This is not a secret, yeah.
Actually, before we go on to the hearing thing, I'd actually love a bit more with the hand-eye coordination stuff, because I heard you say that you do this with your athletes.
Yeah.
Because things like, I think you said Michael Jordan or something, but it's like Michael Jordan, does a catch. 1 second makes a difference between it being Michael Jordan and him no longer being able to play for the NBA.
Yeah, and that's reaction time. So, with neuroathletics, when we bring on a new client, we do a decode phase, which, we get to know everything. We do blood work, we do VO2 max testing, we also do a brain scan. Okay, and in neurophysiology, you would go and see a neurophysiologist if you had, for example, a seizure. They'd scan your brain to see if maybe you've got epilepsy or why the seizure occurred. I use these scans to figure out visual acuity, first and foremost, and reaction time. I'm trying to figure out, okay, when you see a stimulus, how, when you catch a ball and throw it, can we decrease that reaction time? Because that's the difference between LeBron getting 15 points in a game or getting 2 points in a game.
Yeah, and then when I think about myself, things I react to, so even in this episode, right, it's like it's a back and forth. I have to hold a lot in my brain of what you're saying. I have to remember some of the questions I have. I have to remember something that you've said. And so when I'm thinking about my reaction time and my brain capacity and being able to hold things and be able to react to something that you're saying while I'm still holding on to this, while I'm still very aware there's a bunch of cameras around, I'm like, this is the sort of thing that I need to know. And anyone listening at home, and why that's important to them, because I don't want people to dismiss, go, well, I'm not going to be in the NBA, I'm not Serena Williams. It actually doesn't freaking matter.
Driving accidents, actually, a huge cause of driving accidents is reaction time.
So I love that. And now I'm just being me and get a little obsessed. I like to know the exact. So underhand, throw the ball?
Overhand.
Okay, it has to be overhand.
You should do overhand.
Okay, let's do
like
the best.
Neuro-athletics, we're doing overhand throws.
Okay, so overhand.
Yeah.
And then I know that you've said that like the right side of the brain controls the left side of the body.
Yeah.
And vice versa.
Yeah.
So when I'm on one leg, should I be throwing with the opposite hand? Okay.
Yeah, you can do ipsilateral, which is, all on one side, or you can do contralateral. Doesn't really matter. This is the key. It has to be stressful. So, a rebuttal to this. Well, Louisa, I do Sudoku. No. Okay, it's not. Yes, Sudoku is fun. You got to stress the brain. You've got to put it under a bit of, and this puts it under stress.
Some people may be saying, but you've then never done Sudoku.
Yeah, well, that's actually, quite true. But
I literally look at the board and it just stresses me out already.
But it does take it into consideration. So right now, you've trained your brain because you studied. You told me last night you watched some of my episodes. So you were studying, and it took you a long time. So we have to, throughout our lifespan, We have to be always, we have to be working our cognition in some way.
Okay, so it's doing it so you're
Thinking.
stressing it out.
Yeah.
But it's momentary stress versus
Yes.
lifestyle stress.
Correct. We don't want chronic stress, being in a chronic inflammatory state. We just want to be able to stress. And I tell protocols, don't only do this for 10 minutes a day.
That's what I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'll do this 10 minutes a day every single day
Yep.
for the rest of my life?
Rest of your
Wow,
life.
Jesus,
Yeah.
all right.
You can have some weekends
Okay,
off.
thank you. And would it get easier though? Like, in fact, I believe you said like put a blindfold or like
Yeah.
an eye patch.
It's funny. Yeah, when I first started off, I bought these eye patches just from, CVS.
Yeah.
Now we've upgraded. We've actually got like goggles that we put on that they black out. They're like professional ones now. But put an eye patch on, cover one eye, because you've blacked out completely 50% of your brain really, or your eyesight. So it makes it hard. It's like doing weights for the brain.
And I love this because it's really cheap, right? It's a tennis ball that's like $1 and then an eye patch that is probably another $1.
Correct. You can do so many different things. You can even get your husband or wife or a partner involved in that too.
Oh, it's kind of a fun activity.
Yeah,
to
throw
do
the ball
together.
to each other. Yeah. So there are many different things that we do in that area. But I just wanted people to know that exercise for the brain that's what's going to keep it alive and thriving. It has a lot to do with evolution too, but we don't have to go there. But that's the exercise portion.
So what else would you do apart from the ball? What other things can you do from Neuro-athletics?
Oh, it's really funny. So we have a number chart, for example. I would say it's this big, and the numbers, are about this big, and they're 1 to 60. Let's just say on one chart. It is so funny. Okay, so I will get one of my players to go up to the chart, get 2 index fingers, and just find the numbers in chronological order. And actually, this is really important. For some reason, most of the men, when they get to number 14, they can't find it. Okay, they begin to think that I'm tricking them. They're like, you actually haven't got 14 on here. They can't find it. Most women on the first go get up to 20.
Wow.
I don't know why, but it's unbelievable. But listen to this. I get them to step back and take a breath. I stop the timer. I say, find 14, they find it. Why? Because under stress, under pressure, your brain is only built to survive, so it shuts everything down and it makes you not be able to find that number. That's what happens in a game, okay? When you're stressed and anxious in a game, it's like you can't find who to throw the ball with or what to do. You can't find when you're stressed and angered, you're fighting with someone, you're having an argument, you start to say things that just don't make sense because your brain is like, I can't operate. I'm under so much stress. But then you take a moment, you breathe, you activate the parasympathetic nervous system, and then it's like, okay, I can think now.
There must be some hereditary thing going back into cavemen days of why men stop at 14 but women can go all the way to 20.
Yeah.
It's like a woman can't just shut down like that. Let's face it.
I honestly inherently believe it's because evolutionarily, okay, we would have to go out and hunt. And what would happen is we would activate our sympathetic nervous system, fight or flight, in order to run away from the tiger or find food. Okay, and that's what the male's job was. And I think that women inherently now have having to do everything. Grow a human for 9 months. Okay, really, that's a big undertaking. Get the human out. That's another big undertaking. Then be the primary caregiver. Also, put the food on the table, be a housekeeper, and go to work as well, doing everything. So we being able to manage that over time. Maybe that's what it is, but don't quote me on that.
Yeah, I won't.
Yeah.
But it feels right.
It feels
right. It
right.
really does. And just like in general, when it comes to male and female brains, I've read have you read the book, The Female Brain?
Yes.
Oh my God, I love that book. It was one of the first books that I ever read. In fact, this is what initially got me interested in the brain in general, was me and my husband are exactly the same, right? He's different, yes, he's got testosterone and I got, estrogen, but other than that, like I always just thought our brain structures were the same. And then I read the book, The Female Brain, and just literally it follows it through, when you're in the mother's womb to all the way to when you die, and understanding how certain parts of our brain shuts down, I guess it shuts down, I'm not sure if I'm using the right terminology, but as you get into your teen years, because there's certain things that a female will need more nurturing, but a guy needs more of the aggression because of the hunter-gatherer, And so kind of like understanding that, and then that led me to understanding, you know, when you go into a cupboard and a guy like is like, I can't find it, and you're like, it's right in front
right
of
in
you,
front of you, yeah.
and they literally can't see it. My husband still thinks I trick him because he's like, there's no way that was there, and I'm like, yes, it was.
Testosterone. You know what's interesting as well, because I want to point this out because you keep talking about your husband, and there was a wonderful Harvard study done, and it was actually just put out not long ago, and they tracked people over an 80-year time frame. Yeah, so that's why it was a very big study. Okay, what they found was that, guess what the number one key was for lasting brain health?
Love.
Relationships.
Mm.
Isn't that unbelievable?
I only guessed it because of what how you set it up. I never.
Relationships, yeah. And for many reasons, okay? It could be hormonal reasons, but it also could be the fact that men are, you know, it turns out, which I hate to say, but married men live longer than married women. And this is generally because the male is getting looked after by the female. I see this in my parents. In 2019, my dad had a stroke, a minor stroke, but we've seen a lot of, you know, we've seen a lot of downhill cognitive changes since then. And my mother has taken on every role for him. She is the carer, the doctor, the mother, the wife. She's doing absolutely everything. And then I see my dad, and he's like, oh, I feel great. He gets up, and because he's now got someone full time that is looking after him, but my mum's also looking after herself. And you see what's happening over time. So I think maybe that has to do with it, but also the fact that you can get challenged as you get older because you have someone to talk to every day. You have someone to go to bed with. So then you've got the oxytocin, then you've got the love, you've got the serotonin, you have someone to go out and maybe travel with and enjoy time with. Not just that, your brain wants to feel safe. Here's the key thing as well. You mentioned confidence. Put your brain in a safe environment and it will thrive. How do you put it in a safe environment? You nourish it with good food. You don't deprive it of sleep. You give it exercise and you give it hydration. It will feel inherently safe. When it feels safe, you won't feel the need to be negative, and you won't feel as if I am the victim and I'm at the mercy of this person and I have to stay in this toxic relationship. Because when it's unsafe, it's thinking, if you are in some form of, you know, abusive relationship, if I go, maybe I will be even more unsafe than what I am now. Yeah.
Wow, I never thought about like the brain and the safety thing. That's so powerful.
Yeah.
And the thing about women taking care of men, like, and relationships actually, it does really go back to even what I was saying earlier, whereas like I want to take care of myself and not get Alzheimer's for my husband's sake. Like, and to be honest, so I smoke weed, and that's like my one vice. I know, and we got to talk about it. We must talk about it because I'm in a place where I don't deny whether something's good or bad, right? And so I really want to know the truth. I want to know what I'm doing, but I do like it. And so I was like, yeah, you know, I have a vice. But now I'm just knowing everything that I know, learning everything that I'm learning, especially when it comes to the brain. I've done so much research and my own studies on the gut because I've had my own gut health problems. And one of the things was smoke weed. It'll make your gut feel better. And so I really learned into that. But now obviously realizing how much damage it's doing to my brain, I want it for my husband's sake. I want to now actually change because I'm just like, I actually like it. Enjoy it. And so if it actually trims off a couple of years, going back to people just need to make the decision for themselves.
Yeah.
Okay, you know what? I'd probably sacrifice that. But because of my husband, I'm like, I know what it would do to him.
Yeah. This is a great segue into sleep. And I want to tell you this, and I don't know who needs to hear this, but weed isn't helping you sleep. It's also probably not helping you calm down. Okay, so we need to cut the weed. A lot of my athletes actually are smoking it, and I said, if you don't stop, you get kicked out of Neuro-athletics.
Wow,
yeah,
really?
Because I can't do my work and do what I need to do if you're going to be smoking and drinking.
Interesting.
So let's not even focus on weed. Let's focus on the fact that we need sleep. Sleep is a core pillar. Now, I know there's mothers out there and they're going to attack me and say, Louisa, I've got newborns, I don't sleep. I understand that, and it's hard. So we need to figure out, we need to understand what is sleep so we can get on board with it. And I treat sleep as if it's an Olympic game. Treat it as if you need to train for sleep. You need to warm up for sleep, and you need to prepare for sleep the moment that you wake up. In fact, you need to prepare for it the night before. Okay, so sleep is broken up into 4 stages. So we've got stage 1, that's when you're falling asleep. Stage 2, you're in light sleep. So if you hear a loud noise, you'll probably wake up. Then I would say within like 45 minutes, you're in stage 3. Now, the only 2 that I want people to really be aware of is stage 3 and stage 4. Stage 3 is slow wave sleep. It's also known as deep sleep, and it's non-rapid eye movement sleep. So freaking important. 2 things that happen in this stage. Okay, first of all, we get the release of hormones. Women, we get, estrogen gets released. Men, testosterone is getting released during this stage. Okay, we also, both genders, get a massive release of growth hormone. Growth hormone is responsible for protein synthesis. So it's responsible for the repair and regeneration of your muscles. So if you are going to the gym, you're repairing everything that occurred at the gym during deep sleep. Okay, that's the first thing. The second thing that happens is we actually clean our brain like a washing machine during deep sleep. So our body, how we've got a lymphatic system? We've got one in our brain called the lymphatic system. Now, we have specialized nerve cells in our brain. They're called glial cells. It comes from the Greek word glue, okay, glia. It means glue, and that's what they do. So they stick to other neurons. Now, what happens during deep sleep specifically? They shrink. So if they're over here, they shrink in size, and this allows for the fluid in our brain, cerebral spinal fluid, to wash through like a washing machine. It's called the perivascular space, so inside, and the cerebral spinal fluid goes through like a washing machine, and it gets all of the toxins from the day, the debris, and it cleans it out.
And it only shrinks while you're sleeping in that deep
sleep. Now get this, one of the toxins that builds up is amyloid beta. Amyloid beta is one of the hallmarks of Alzheimer's disease, which makes sense, right? Because Alzheimer's disease patients, the pathology of it, right? They don't get to sleep much because of, this state. They don't, they have disrupted sleep. But because of disrupted sleep, we can raise our risk of Alzheimer's disease. So it is a cycle, right? So we need to be sleeping. So what's a good marker of this? Well, you can wake up, because you don't have to have an Oura ring or a Whoop strap. If you wake up and you're groggy, you've got brain fog, you're cloudy, you've probably not tapped into that system, okay? So deep sleep, we need to be getting into it. What blocks deep sleep?
I'm sure you're going to say weed.
Weed and alcohol and light exposure. Ethanol, which is the active ingredient in alcohol, is killing your brain cells. No amount of alcohol is good for the brain. I don't care if you say to me, Louisa, what about the people in Sardinia who are drinking red wine? My rebuttal to that is the people living in Icaria, in these Greek islands, don't have the stress that we have. They also don't have the food that we have, and they're probably sleeping a lot better. So imagine your brain as a bank, right? Federal government, your brain is a bank. If you withdraw from let's say the sleep bank, that's not good, okay? But you need to make sure that you've got reserves around here as well. So don't drink because you've already taken maybe some sleep away. Because we're all human. You're not going to be 10 out of 10 for absolutely every single account. So if you have a glass of alcohol, if you maybe smoke some weed, you also don't sleep well, you also don't hydrate, you also had a bad day, look at all the money that you are withdrawing from all the accounts. Okay, so no amount of alcohol is good for the brain. Now, how can I back this up by science? There's a wonderful study that was done in the journal Nature, a really high stringent journal. I posted about this, and it showed that moderate drinkers, for women, this is 7 drinks a week. And that means 7 drinks within a 7-day time. So you can have your 7 drinks in one day, or you can have them spanned across the week.
Right.
It doesn't matter.
Yeah.
Okay, so 7 drinks a week. You are now classified as a moderate drinker. For men, it's 14, right? By the way, it does not matter if you're getting 3 glasses of vodka, okay, and 4 glasses of red wine. It's 7 drinks.
Right.
What they found in that individuals who are having 7 drinks or becoming moderate drinkers, either male or female, you are getting a decrease in gray matter volume and white matter volume.
So explain what that is, if you don't mind.
Our brain is comprised of gray matter, and that sits on the outer portion of our brain. It's like the cerebral cortex. Gray matter just means it's got the cell bodies.
Got it.
Okay, that's where all the nucleus is involved. Now, remember at the start I told you about the axon? That's the white matter, okay? That is where all of our myelination happens. Have you heard of myelin? Okay, this is where conduction happens, okay? Conduction of thought, conduction of muscle movements. It all happens down that myelin, okay? So it's myelinated neurons. That is called white matter. So that's the white matter. This is the gray matter. You are killing both areas of the brain through drinking. So ethanol is not just disrupting sleep. You're not just blocking sleep. You're also killing neurons.
And can you get those neurons back if you stop drinking?
Adult neurogenesis does not exist in humans.
So in England, where drinking is legal at the age of 18,
And Australia.
is probably quite young.
Yeah, your brain hasn't fully developed. Not just that, let's not even talk about it. You're building habits.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, remember, every behavior your brain will learn, good or bad. Good behavior, it learns it because you produce something and you go down this highway.
Yeah.
Okay, the axon, that's what you go down the highway, your myelin sheath gets thicker. Okay, you go down that highway again, it learns that highway. So it's like, okay, it's a habit. The more times you drink, the more times you reinforce to your brain, it's okay.
And then also, so again, I want to make sure, I personally never have judgment on people in that sense of, if you hear the information and you still choose to because that's the life you want, amazing. I'm always just trying to make sure that we don't trick ourselves. And so that's why, even though I smoke weed, it's important for me to talk about, because I don't want to trick myself.
Yeah.
I don't want to trick myself into the old belief system that I had that actually served me at the time, right? Which is like, no, smoke weed, it's going to be great for your gut. And so it's super important that we talk about this. I don't want people to, at least for me, like, I'm not judging them. Go ham, guys, if you really want to. I would just advise, if you want to have a healthy brain in everything that we're saying, don't do it. And then one thing I'd also like to talk about when with the alcohol thing is just the inflammation and what inflammation does to your brain, and then the things that cause inflammation.
Yeah, this inflammation thing is really tough, right? So remember how I told you about the arteries, okay, and then the walls of the arteries. What happens in cardiovascular disease, okay, or even in brain health, okay? These arteries, like I said, they are responsible. They're like tunnels or tubes, and that's where all the blood flows. With cardiovascular disease, what happens is we either get narrowing of those arteries, okay, and we get plaque that builds up inside, which ends up being an occlusion of blood. What happens then in our heart? We get a heart attack. In our brain, it's called a stroke. In our lung, it's called a pulmonary embolism. But I want people to understand that a stroke is the exact same everywhere. It's an occlusion of a blood vessel. We can have a stroke in our brain. We can have a stroke in our heart. It's just called a heart attack, or a stroke in our lung. Okay?
Pulmonary brain attack, I think you call it, right?
Or a brain attack. How do we get narrowing? Well, if our tunnel, okay, or this tube is, if the wall of it becomes indented, it becomes smaller, right? We'll get narrowing of that. One way that happens is through inflammation. It makes the lining of that artery weak. Okay, so that's one reason why chronic inflammation is bad. Another reason is it disrupts the mitochondria within our cell. And metabolic dysfunction is at the heart, and I would say at the center of a lot of these disease states: cancer, neurodegenerative diseases, and cardiovascular disease. And in fact, I think what we need to talk about as well is energy. We all want energy. We need energy to survive. We need energy to think and focus. How do we deplete our energy? It's with disrupted mitochondria. Okay, so this is another reason why we don't want to be, inducing that inflammatory response.
Yeah.
The only time you need inflammation is when you are exercising, really, because you need an inflammatory response to get a hypertrophy and strength.
Which, by the way, yes, you've totally ruined my cold plunges that I was doing right after my workout, because I literally just adopted it like a week ago. I'm going to do a cold plunge every day. I'm going to do it right after my workout. And then I heard you say, yeah, don't do cold plunges as soon as you've worked out, because you want your muscles to have a bit of that inflammation.
Yeah, you do. So you block this hormetic response. So you need the inflammation. The inflammation gets driven to the muscle and it regenerates and it gets stronger and bigger. But if you go through and block it, because that's the beauty of a cold bath, it blocks the inflammation, then you block what you've just done at training.
Yeah.
So protocol, 3 hours outside of exercise. Before or after, get into your cold plunge, because cold plunge is amazing.
Oh my God. Being Greek, I'm always like, my blood, my genetics don't like the cold.
Yeah.
And so again, every time I realize I'm giving myself an excuse over something, I have taught myself out of a habit to go, that means you have to do it, Lisa.
Yeah.
So when I was like, cold plunge, I could never do that.
Yeah.
Like my blood, I'm a Greek person, guys.
Yes.
And then I was like, oh shit, that means I have to do it. Give it a week. Like that's always what I'm saying. Do it for 7 days.
Yeah.
If you, after 7 days, Lisa, you choose not to do it, at least you've given it a shot. But now you know it's not the excuse part. And I started to do it. And as I'm doing it, to me, it was about doing the hard thing.
Yeah.
So it was like, I freaking hate the cold. I don't want to do it. Oh my God, I just did it. Wow.
Yeah.
You go, Lisa. Like that encouragement
Dopamine.
thing. Yeah. Oh, yeah, you're right.
Not just that, when you actually get into cold, you get, one of the best things about cold is you get a profound release and rapid release of norepinephrine.
And what does that do?
Norepinephrine is beautiful. It's both a neurotransmitter when released in the brain, and it's actually a hormone when it's released in the body. But in the brain, this neurotransmitter is involved in vigilance and focus, which is why when you get into it, you feel a lot, I can take on the day.
Yeah.
So it's great.
So how long is ideal that I should do it for? Because I need to know how many songs I have to play. Because again, that's my thing. If I'm going to be in there, I have to sing.
What temperature is it? In Celsius or in Fahrenheit?
Oh, I know Fahrenheit.
Is it 40?
No, it's like 55.
Okay, you should be generally doing that for, how long are you getting in the bath for?
I was only doing it for like a song, so 3 minutes.
Well, that's fine. If you're doing it if you're doing it over 50 degrees, maybe you want to stay in there for around 5 minutes.
Yeah.
Okay, but instead of getting caught up on the timing, because everyone's different, get caught up on when you start to shiver. Okay, you want to induce the shivering response, but you also don't want to stay in the, you kind of want to get out when you are comfortably cold, meaning, so you get in.
Isn't that an oxymoron?
That's how it is in science. It's like comfortably cold. So you want to get in where you're shivering, and it's like, I'll get out when I just am about to faint, really.
Oh, okay, yeah.
But don't faint.
Okay, yeah, don't faint. But I actually want everyone at home, guys, if you're listening, I bet, try it for 7 days. Just give it a shot. If you hate it, you can tell me, drop in the comments that you hate it, but I'm telling you, give it a shot for 7 days and then let me know how you feel. I guarantee you freaking love it.
Also start with a cold shower if you don't want to, just start to work your way up. Yeah. Okay?
And then, sorry, I completely derailed us from sleep.
Yeah, we derailed us from sleep.
Because
so we're
I
up
really
to
want
deep sleep.
Yes.
Okay, so you've blocked sleep.
Okay,
so we now know that alcohol and weed is blocking our sleep. It's sedating us. So you're just knocking yourself out.
Right.
Yes, sedating.
Yes.
That's deep sleep. So we now know the importance of deep sleep. Then we have stage 4, which is rapid eye movement sleep. You'll see it on your Oura Ring REM sleep. It's involved in memory consolidation and learning. So this is where when we're in this phase, and actually on an EEG, what you see is you have a horizontal eye movements. So your brain, actually, you're completely paralyzed from the neck down, but your brain actually mimics an awake person. So you're right, that's where the name came from, rapid eye movement sleep. Your eyes are going in horizontal motion, and that's why we know you're in rapid eye movement sleep. Things that block it are exact same thing. Stress, light exposure, alcohol, sleep. If anyone does have a wearable in terms of times and percentages, your total sleep time, so 20% of your total sleep time should be made up of REM sleep.
Is there an ideal amount of sleep for a man versus a woman? My husband always gets way less sleep than I do, and he feels great.
Does he?
Yeah.
So
That was a sarcastic answer.
So how many hours? I don't know how many hours, but look, everybody is different, okay?
Yeah.
You know, LeBron, big man, obviously is exerting so much energy throughout the day, would most likely need a lot more than other people. It depends on first of all, it depends on how much output you are doing throughout the day. But as a general rule of thumb, you do want to be sleeping minimum 7.5 to 8 hours. Because we know that the studies on sleep deprivation, which is 6 hours or less, which is, by the way, most of New York and probably most of mothers as well, we know that there was a wonderful study in PNAS, okay, really another high stringent journal where they took a group of healthy men, okay, middle-aged healthy men. They subjected them to 1 week of sleep deprivation of 6 hours, okay. This is what they found. They found a change in 711 genes. Now, 711, okay, there's 25,000 genes in the human genome. That means you have an epigenetic change of 3% through sleep deprivation. This is what they found. Half of those genes were upregulated. Half of them were downregulated. Now, the genes responsible for tumor growth were upregulated. The genes responsible for immunity were downregulated. So through sleep deprivation, classified as 6 hours or less, in these human males, resulted in an epigenetic change of 3%. So you are changing your genome through lack of sleep. And you know what, the fact that this is one other thing where we have to point out, who are you giving your sleep deprivation to? Are you giving it to social media? Because that's really quite, like, you should smack yourself across the face. You know, like, who's responsible for your epigenetic change and your diseases? Is it social media?
All right, so what if
it's your kids and that's a different story?
But that's what I was going to say.
Get that.
So let's actually talk about that, because so for healthy men, God bless them, after a week, like, that's obviously very damaging. That's massive.
Yeah.
So now actually let's talk about women who have 3 children.
I know.
Who do this for 20 years.
Yeah.
What does that actually look like? And look, again, there might not be a solution, right? Because someone's like, well, look, I don't have a nanny.
Yeah.
My husband isn't around, or I don't have a partner, and now I'm looking at. So they may not have a choice. So assume actually some people may be in that situation.
Yeah, I get that, and I'm so empathetic to it. And as I'm getting older, and as a woman, I've kind of think that this is the way I would say it, because it doesn't change just because you're a woman. Let's go back to the multiple accounts at the bank. If you know, and I actually do this in my life, if I know I'm going to be sleep deprived one night because I've got an early start and I have a crazy life, right? On and off planes. If I know that, I'm going to make sure that I'm 100 on my hydration, on my eating, on my supplementation, and on my exercise. Not just that, take breaks during the day. So at Neuro-athletics, we have a 10 minutes, okay? I don't know what to call it, but I call it shut the fuck up time. Okay? That's what it is. And
I love that. I'm so taking that.
It's because I have, 99% of my clients are men, and I have to change so many things just to cater for their vocabulary. And they don't like meditation. They don't like mindful. So I say, okay, just shut up then for 10 minutes a day. And I get them to completely, it's like sensory deprivation. Okay.
That's what I was going to ask. What do they do in that time?
Earplugs.
Okay.
Okay. Eye mask. Just sit there. I don't care whether you're laying down, and it's only for 10 minutes, okay? If you don't want to fall asleep, then don't lay down, but that's basically just shutting down your body for 10 minutes a day. That's all. It's better than telling them to go to sleep. It's better than telling them to do mindfulness, because all you do is just put your mask on, put your earplugs in, sit down in a quiet room. Don't do anything for 10 minutes. Don't move.
And what do you see the benefits of that?
Oh my God. Well,
What up, homie? I got something free and new to share with you right now.
How often are you visited by that negative voice in your head telling you that you're not smart enough, that you're not good enough, experienced enough, not fill in the blank? One of the most powerful things you can learn to do in life is to turn that negative voice into your bestie. And I want to teach you how to do that and so much more in my 4 Steps to Becoming Confident workshop. And guys, the most amazing thing is you can actually register for completely free for this workshop. So click the link on your screen and I'll see you on the inside.
they're completely lowering whatever stress that's happening. I get them to do it at 2 p.m. Okay, that's at the peak of when you're like, I'm at the most stressful stage. Okay, you're adding to the bank, the sleep bank as well. If you end up falling asleep for 20 minutes, that's fine, because napping, I don't see a problem in it. I don't see a problem in napping. So yeah.
That's what I was going to ask you. I heard you talk about binge sleeping, and that ideally it's not the best thing to do.
It's not. Okay, because sleep isn't like a debt, again, that we can repay at the bank. You can't expect to sleep 12 hours in one day, then sleep 6 hours for the rest of the week. Okay, so I call it binge sleeping. I say, because we're humans, just focus on sleeping well 80% of the time. And that's because we are humans. If we could do it 100% of the time, great. But you do, again, maybe sleep 5 nights a week perfectly, and just cater for those 2 nights that you may be out or sleep deprived.
Okay, I'm now going to block at 2 p.m. every day unless I'm shooting a shut the fuck up time,
Yeah.
Lisa.
Yeah.
Eye mask and earplugs, you said.
Yep.
I love that.
Quiet
And
room.
it needs to be quiet, not like music.
Yeah, no, that's
Okay.
what the earplugs are, because you've got all these sensors. Okay, you don't want to be touching anything. You just want to lower the sensors as much as possible. If you Google, I also want you to Google the homunculus. Okay, I'll tell you how to spell it after this.
Yeah.
I've got a little
What the hell
homunculus
is it?
figure, but what you'll see is this little guy. His hands are obnoxiously like large, which means that your hands take up a lot of surface area in your brain. And they're just these little structures. But we know that through grip strength, through opposable thumbs, through, we've got these, these receptors all over our hands. So don't touch anything, just completely sensory deprivation.
Yeah, actually, when you say grip strength, I forgot to mention that earlier, that I heard you say, when you were talking about the ball, like it specifically is throwing a ball versus hitting a ball with a bat.
Yeah. Look, I love tennis. I've just started taking it up, and it's great for hand-eye coordination, great for the brain. But yeah, this, but it also involves grip strength as well. But this one is also, you're really just, pulsating that grip strength as well.
Okay, so I actually would love to go through now someone's list. Hopefully they're all bought in. I'm going to get better sleep,
I hope
Lisa.
they
I
are.
understand why.
Yeah.
Now let's go through how people get better sleep, because again, I'm so freaking tactical, and I just beg of people to try this for 7 days. In fact, would you recommend 7? Or is like, I just worry if I say 30, people aren't going to do it. I want people to try what you're about to explain of how to get a best sleep possible.
I was actually going to do in July, I was going to do a challenge for everybody.
Shit.
Yeah, which was just a 14-day challenge.
Okay.
And that is just 14 days of doing everything, as in like, we're not smoking. And if anyone's actually smoking cigarettes, which we didn't touch on, I don't.
I assume that's a big
I'm
no-no.
appalled. Yeah. So we won't even talk about the cigarettes. We're not going to be smoking weed. We're not going to be drinking alcohol. And we're going to sit. It's like a sleep challenge. 14 days. Let's try and sleep for 7.5 to 8 hours. If you wake up, okay, just due to natural body clock, and it's only been 6 hours, just lay there and force yourself back to sleep if you can.
So if someone was to do that now for sleep specifically, what are the things they need to try that they can do immediately?
First of all, timing. Let's talk about that. We need to be sleeping at an appropriate time. Neuro-athletics lights out is 10 p.m. So we want to be getting you into bed by around 9:30.
And I have a question for you there. Does it depend on the time of year? Because 9:30 in LA, it's just gotten dark. But in the summer, but in the winter at 5 p.m., it's pitch black.
No, because we work on, so our that's a really great point. Our circadian rhythm is a 24-hour clock, and you need to be in alignment with that. And so your body knows when it's waking up and when the 24 hours.
And it does matter on the time. It's not like you can go to bed at 1 o'clock and have the 7.5 hours sleep. Please explain that, because I didn't understand it until I started diving deep into sleep.
Yeah, so if you're going to sleep from 1 a.m. to 9 a.m., that 8 hours isn't the same as sleeping 10 p.m. till 6 a.m. The reason being is really got to do with light. Because if you are awake, you're generally getting light of any form, because you're not going to be sitting in a pitch black room. Now, what happens is from the time of 10 p.m. and 4 a.m., that's when we get the release of our dopamine, which when we wake up tells us, okay, we are up, we are thriving, we are excited, we are ready to go. Light exposure actually blocks the area of your brain that releases the dopamine during that night, which is called the habenula. It stops the release. So you wake up and you immediately have a blockage of that dopamine. Therefore, you don't get a head start on your day.
And you want to talk about being grumpy all day and irritable.
Yeah, not just that, you also need to take into consideration Mother Nature. Okay, you need to be waking up with the sun, essentially. If you're going to sleep and waking up at 9 a.m., then you're essentially telling your body the following night not to get tired until 9 p.m. because it's a 12 and 12. So you really want to get on this 12 and 12 hour clock. So 10 p.m. is lights out. So what do we do working up to? Remember, it's an Olympic game, so we need to warm up. We're not going to eat. Okay, we're going to have 1.5 hours prior to going to bed of not eating. That's because digestion takes 90 minutes. You don't want to be digesting food in your sleep.
I found 3 hours for me is the perfect amount.
See, everyone's different. 3 hours for me, what would happen is when I go to bed, I'd be starving and nothing's stopping me.
Right, yeah. Know thyself.
Yeah, no, I will get up and I will eat and I'll be ravenous, and that would just mess me up. And a lot of my guys as well are the same.
Really?
So it's like an hour and a half. If you can go 2, then go 2. Second thing is we really want to minimize light, right? Our eyes are just extensions of our central nervous system. So our central nervous system is awake when it sees light. So trying to minimize light, overhead lighting, okay? That's coming into our eyes. We want to minimize that. So I have floor lamps in my apartment. So that means like I'm still getting light, so I'm not pitch black, very dim.
And these are lights that are on the floor beaming up at you instead of coming down at you.
Correct. Yeah. And they're very dim. So it's like, so you got to have good eyesight in my apartment.
Blue blockers, if you don't have those types of lights?
I caution against that. To me, it's 95% marketing. I wear them. But are they really they may be doing a 1%.
Really? That's it?
Yeah.
Wow, okay.
Your eyes are really susceptible to light at night. So they're weak. So any type of light will affect it.
Okay.
So we've got light exposure. Then something that I've been dabbling with, I don't know if you've done this, is temperature.
Game changer.
So how are you doing it?
So I've done it with our AC in our room, and then our AC broke one day, and I had one of those cold mattress things, and I loved it. And then I took it away once our AC started again, and then I dive into your world, and I was like, all right, I've got to bring it back out.
Well, that's really important, because we now know that in order to fall asleep and stay asleep, because the two biggest complaints people have is trouble falling asleep or trouble staying asleep.
Yeah.
So in order to fall asleep, our core body temperature needs to drop at least 2 degrees. Core. Now, AC is ambient temperature. So we need to drop it 2 degrees. So if we need to be cold throughout the night, because the reason why we wake up is we get an increase in body temperature, which then releases cortisol. Cortisol is our stress hormone, wakes us up, gets us up ready to run away from the tiger. So we need to remain cold throughout the night. Even if it's 1 a.m. and you get a rise in temperature, you will wake up naturally, right? So how do we do that if we don't have a temperature controlled mattress?
And especially when women, if you're going through like menopause. I can imagine that would be.
Well, that's why these temperature control mattresses are great, because it splits the bed. So if you sleep with someone who's not as a hot sleeper, you can turn their temperature one way and you can turn yours down. Yeah. So what I like to do is you release heat through the pores of your hands and also from your feet. I tell people sleep with your feet outside of the sheets and your hands outside.
That's such a smart little genius hack.
Yeah, a little hack that you can do. Maybe, switch the AC on as well. I know a lot of ACs have timers, so you can switch it on and off when you need to. So temperature is another big one for training for sleep. Then another one, don't answer emails. Don't get on the phone with somebody. I've got a lot of relatives that, really can hype me up. I wouldn't call them at, past 8 p.m. You want to be relaxed. You want to get your brain and body into a state of relaxation so it's primed for sleep.
Or like that person in your life, like you said, either it's family or friends that maybe is the person that always is a Debbie Downer, or that, your partner that maybe kind of a bit of a wet blanket, or someone that's always very negative, like staying away from those people before you go to bed.
Have you noticed a pattern, which I'm hoping everyone at home has noticed? The pattern in this entire podcast is you are in control of your brain, okay, and you are also to blame for the state at which your brain is in. We have access to free education. You're doing this podcast. People are putting information out there. So then it comes down to control and discipline. So you do have the control to do this. Every time I talk to you, I'm reinforcing the fact that you are to blame. If you wake up and you're tired, okay, apart from genetics or something that's happened, like you do have control over the way that you sleep. You just have to be disciplined.
I love that. Yeah, like I want you to blame me.
Yeah,
like that. I feel the sting when you
we're
say
Bilyeu,
that.
we're separate. That's how we're being blamed for everything.
We are, yeah, especially as women. Yeah. But look, that language speaks very well with me. Like when I wake up, when I had the brain fog, I was like, well, Lisa, you have to figure this out. And it isn't easy. And so finding the right people that's part of the show, right? It's like the Trojan horse.
Yeah.
Like, this is for my audience, but really it's for me. Because I want to improve and I want to get better. And with things like this, I think of myself, okay, there's so much messaging out there, right? A lot of it is definitely for guys. So having you come on that is very much understands us women is super important. And then giving us the information so that I've got the opportunity to make a pivot. Because you better believe, girl, by the end of this, I'm buying a tennis ball, I'm buying an eye mask, I'm buying earplug. But all of these things now go, okay, I didn't know this.
Yeah.
I don't blame myself for it. But now that I do, what am I going to do about it? And when I was waking up with brain fog, feeling like when I had the worst gut issues, I wasn't sleeping. My hormones were all over the place. And that's the worst I've ever felt about myself.
Yeah.
And I was bullied and teased as a kid. And it was my gut issues that made me feel badly about myself because I wasn't sleeping, because I couldn't exercise, like everything that you're talking about. And it never went straight to the brain. I kind of always thought it's like, maybe it's my hormones and that's why. But that's why this is so important, because I'm really hoping people right now, they may feel lost and they're like, I have this, I didn't know that there's anything I could do. I thought I was stupid. I thought that I was born like this. I thought. And now with everything that you're saying is, now we have the opportunity to step up. And all I say to people is, if you don't do it, and you wake up and you have brain fog, or you don't have the clarity, or you haven't built the confidence because of your hormones and your sleep patterns,
exactly.
Like, look at yourself. And I mean that with compassion and love, because I do that to myself as well.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And you know what the exciting thing is? You can make more money with a higher performing brain. You can you can secure a better job with a high performing brain. You can secure a better partner, a better life partner with a high performing brain, because you start to see things. If you have a weak brain, you kind of are like, you're a bit lazy and you miss things. You miss those red flags. Oh, did he just do that? Oh, it's whatever. I don't care, because it's too lazy. Because your brain is also, imagine a cup, if you will, okay? And the water in the cup, this is your brain. The water in the cup is the energy. With every gulp that we take, every sip, we're just taking energy away from our brain. The sips are thoughts. Okay, so the more thoughts you have, the more sips you take. And if it's all the way depleted, and then you see the guy that you're seeing at night, okay, and you've depleted all your energy, you've got a weak brain, you're not going to see the narcissistic qualities, you're not going to see the red flags, you're not going to see the other girl that's texting him, you're just going to let it fly because your brain's just like, I'm just here to survive because I've got no energy left. So build the energy, build the cognitive reserve, build the resilience. So when you do see him at night at 6 p.m. and he does turn up half an hour late, you can be like, red flag. If you're that strict.
No, I know, but also, I mean, but the boundaries thing is something that we talk a lot about
Boundaries,
here. And
yeah.
boundaries, the big part is, how do I set the boundary? And so I've done multiple episodes like that. But also, how do I have the confidence to set the boundary in the first place? Because that's where some people get stuck. And in everything that you've just laid out in so many beautiful ways to really bring it down to how we can understand it and then what we can do about it, it's given us so many tools that people can immediately start.
Yeah, absolutely. So let's close off sleep. So we now know that sleep is fundamentally a high performance tool that we have.
Unsung hero, right?
Okay, unsung hero. It's free. We've been doing it for centuries and we need to do it more. Okay, train. It's sleep fitness. Okay, how fit are you in bed, really?
Oh, sleep fitness, I like that.
Yeah.
Oh, actually, there was one more thing though about sleep that I haven't tried, and I've heard you talk about it, and so I need you to convince me to try it. Mouth tape.
Yes. Okay. Mouth tape is great. So mouth breathers, this changes your entire face. So if you're breathing at night, you're not getting the adequate amount of oxygen that your brain needs. So sleeping, if you are healthy, maybe if you sleep with somebody else, just in case something happens, try mouth breathing. Try mouth taping. I actually do this when I'm exercising to reinforce nostril breathing. Yeah.
So you take it. You don't find that tough? I mean, maybe
I
do find it tough.
Yeah, I do. And a lot of athletes are doing this now. And I know a lot of guys in the bodybuilding space are doing this as well. It's so tough.
So explain it to me. So the oxygen you're bringing through your nose is more than the oxygen through your mouth. And it's purely that simple?
Yeah, that's it. We don't even need to go into the mechanism there. Yeah. I just want people to understand that. You're getting greater amounts of oxygen through nasal breathing. And actually, if I just go a bit more into it, there's a really great book called Breath or Breathe, okay? And he talks about it talks about our jaw structure and that it's getting smaller because we are mouth breathers now.
How is that even possible?
It's unbelievable. Yeah, you should, I don't know too much into it, but I read that book and it changed my life. And that's actually why most people are now using strips for their mouth.
Because they want to have a nice jawline?
They want to have a nice jawline, yeah, especially the men.
But isn't it interesting? It kind of goes back to looks.
Yeah.
Like, I wish that there was a way that we could see our brains and it became just like, people look at cup sizes or booties, where it's like, what's your brain like?
Oh my gosh. And you should see, as you get older, if you compare a 20-year-old brain, you do an MRI scan. So your brain, it's your brain, and then there's some fluid, and then there's like the dura matter, the pia matter. It's like this coating, and then your skull. So between this space, it's very thin, okay? You've got fluid, the cerebral spinal fluid. But as you get older, that space ends up getting thicker because your brain shrinks, and it's unbelievable. I can actually send you the scans of a 20-year-old brain and then like a 90-year-old brain.
And your brain is shrinking because parts of it is shutting down?
Your brain shrinks because that's what we do as we get older, and then there's neurodegenerative diseases, lack of oxygen. By the way, remember how I told you about the capillaries in the brain, the blood vessels? The first ones to go are these little capillaries. They're 1 cell thick. They're the diameter of a hair. And when we get stressed out or when we have hypertension, which is high blood pressure, they're the first ones to go. Whoa. Therefore, lack of oxygen to that little area of the brain that the capillary is supplying your brain with, atrophy. Imagine over the span of 80 years, if you've just completely fucked up your brain and your blood flow, you're going to shrink your brain. We don't want that.
Whoa. Holy smokes. Girl, I literally could talk to you forever. We haven't even touched nutrition.
Yeah.
If there's any tips you could actually give on nutrition.
Very fast. I'm not in nutrition. The nutrition science space is insane. But I'll talk about some supplements because everyone loves that. And I think they're great. I think we all need to be taking, a fair
And
few
supplements
of them.
better than the food itself?
Depends, okay? For my favorite supplement, I'll go to my grave saying that everyone should be taking this, is EPA DHA. So omega-3 fatty acids. It comes from fatty fish, mackerel and salmon. They have omega-3 fatty acids, and it's broken up into EPA, DHA, and ALA. Now, ALA is the plant form. You can get this from flax seeds and chia seeds. But I try and say stay away from that, okay?
Why?
Because you need a greater amount of it to get the necessary quantity that we need. Your brain, 57% of your brain is made of DHA,
Whoa.
okay? So we need to be feeding our brain what it's made of. So if you can get some high quality EPA supplements, my recommendation is 4 grams a day, which is 2 grams of each. 2 grams of EPA, 2 grams of DHA.
And is there a brand? Because it never dawned on me. I don't know why it never dawned on me, but I was like,
Oh,
no.
yes.
You said that there's some that are just completely misleading.
Yeah. So the FDA don't regulate supplements. So it's an extremely unregulated industry, meaning that anybody in the back of their truck can fill a capsule up, a vegetable capsule, slap a label on it and call it a supplement. You don't know what it's laced with. So you need to be making sure that you're getting one that has been certified. Okay, so I take Momentous supplements and they have been triple certified. So you get certified once, then again, and then just for good luck, we've got it certified 3 times. So you know that it's pure. Okay, there's some other great supplement companies out there as well that are doing it, but just make sure it's been certified. Now, EPA DHA is absolutely fundamental. It helps with inflammation, bringing down inflammation. It helps with cell membrane fluidity. We want fluid cells to be able to just move and glide through, all right? So, and of course our brain is made of it.
And so repeat foods have this?
Yeah,
So
it's fatty fish.
yeah.
Now you said, can we get this from our foods? Have you seen Seaspiracy? It's a Netflix doco.
No, but I can guess what it's about.
It'll scare you. It'll show you what's happening in our oceans. And all of the fish that we're eating is farmed. Okay, unless you're going to a Greek. I just went to Castellorizo and we were eating fresh fish that was caught from the ocean. We don't have that here in America. So most of the fish you're eating is farmed. So it's completely stripped of the EPA and DHA. So that's another hard thing. And then in Seaspiracy, you'll see even if they do catch the fish, you cut it open and all this plastic is coming out of because the fish are eating the plastic.
Oh God! So what do we do about that?
Well, we eat the
supplements.
Yeah.
Okay.
The second thing for ladies that I really want everyone to know is creatine. So we used to think that creatine was a bodybuilding supplement that just helped with, making bodybuilders bigger. But we now know that it's extremely apparent in the brain. So creatine monohydrate, actually, it's a naturally occurring molecule, but it helps with cell energy metabolism. We should be having it. It's the cheapest and safest supplement on the market. You should be having creatine every single day. Ladies are scared to take this because they're scared of getting bulky, but they're also scared of getting bloated. It doesn't do that.
At all?
No. So you can be doing this and having at least 5 grams a day.
Okay.
Okay. It won't make you bulky. It won't make you bloated.
And so what does it do?
It helps with cell energy metabolism. So ATP, which occurs with it. Yeah. It helps with giving us energy. It actually helps create that.
Got it. So it will help with our energy in general, and we just should take that on a daily basis no matter what.
Especially if you are a working woman who needs to be like, Louisa, my energy needs to be soaring until like 8, 9 o'clock at night. It helps with that focus endurance. All right.
That's what I was going to ask, like with your athletes and, your high performers and CEOs, what is the thing that is important for them? Is it usually before you do this big thing that has a lot of pressure, like an hour before? Like how do we, if we do the daily things, right, the creatine, do that daily no matter what, is there anything that we can do specifically on days where we may have this high pressure? Or to your point, right, okay, the family's coming into town, my in-laws are here, I've got to do extra hours at work and my kids are off school. And so now I need more energy.
Yeah. One thing that your brain doesn't like, it doesn't like to be shocked. It loves routine, which is why I say try and go to bed every night at the same time. So if you, so let's just say you've done everything. You've slept well, I've hydrated with water and electrolytes, electrolytes, okay, which actually help your synapses, okay, the chemical reaction that occurs between two cells. When they fire and create a chemical synapse, they are firing through sodium and potassium. So these are electrolytes. So make sure you're feeding that.
And just add that to your water?
Add that to your water.
Okay.
Let's just say you've done all that. How else can we prepare for that moment of being under pressure? I like to create a list. Okay, here's another thing I created with my athletes, because when you're under pressure, you can come up with so many things that could go wrong. I get a piece of paper and literally I say, what's the worst that can happen? I get them to write out everything. I could lose money, I could get fired, I could do this, I could do, and if the word death isn't on there, I tell them to just stop it. I say this is all obsolete. These are just made up thoughts in your head that you have gathered through information because you're lazy, you're gathering these information, you're making up thoughts in your head, okay, to make yourself feel better and to get yourself out of it. Get rid of those thoughts, because unless it's death, you have nothing to worry about. Okay, but also if you wake up every morning and you've got a list of things to do, you're also not gonna, it's gonna be better for you and better for your brain, because you're not gonna shock your brain.
So true.
Yeah.
Okay, is there any other kind of supplements or
Yeah,
anything?
so we've got EPA, DHA, we've got creatine. The last one is just make sure that your B vitamins are intact. So you can go and get a blood test. If you're low in B vitamins, just, start to take those. We know that they're implicated in neurodegenerative diseases. All of these three supplements, by the way, are also neuroprotective. There's really great studies that are done on high school NFL athletes or high school footballers, where they dose them with 20 grams of creatine per day, and it actually helps offset some of the damage that happens from a concussion. So creatine is not just useful in cell energy metabolism, but it also offsets the damaging effects of concussions.
How the hell do you get people to be compliant? And what I mean is that everything we've laid out today, I get so excited about. Honestly, I dove into your world for like at least 6 hours, and I've had the most fun.
Yeah.
And I've seen all your interviews. I'm literally keeping an ongoing note of all the things that I now need to do, what I need to change, because I'm so obsessed with how do I show up and perform at the highest level, because I've got a big freaking audacious goal, homie, and I know it's going to take me years to get there. And so how the hell do I show up every day with enthusiasm, excitement, energy, confidence, and just keep going? But I don't think everybody has that. Now, look, I decided not to have children so that I could do this. So there's a lot going on, like the decisions that I've made that have led me to this. But I'm just taking, let's say, someone at home right now that's got their everyday problems and they've got family pressures and all of this stuff. It's a lot for them to do. And so how do we help people stay compliant to maintaining their sleep, doing the exercise, and then I'm going to guess your answer, but if someone says, I only have time for one, which one should they be doing?
That wasn't going to be my answer, kind of. My answer to that is ask yourself this question. How do I want to spend the last 10 years of my life? You can very well live, okay, to 100. But what is that worth if the last 20 years you are demented and on a bunch, and you are a self-pharmacy, you've got all these medications and you can barely walk? So you have to think about that, and that should be your driving force. If you have kids, you should think to yourself, do I want to be able to communicate with my kids as I get older? Do I want to be a burden on my kids as I get older? Figure out your why. That's actually the first thing. Thankfully for me, I do work with 20 of the world's best athletes. So they are naturally driven. They are naturally wanting to. And, it's hard because when you're already the best, they're like, well, how are you going to get me better? I'm already the best. So I have to get them better than themselves. So that even makes my job even more difficult. So you have to figure out your why. Where does your motivation come from? Now let's actually talk about what you said. If I only have room for one, that's hard, because I say, well, I think you should first get your sleep. You just work on sleep. I don't say you only have time for one, okay? For 2 months, just work on sleep. Because even if you are completely sleep deprived and you try and exercise, as you're not going to get the effects. You're not going to push yourself as hard, and you're not going to regenerate through sleep. So just work on one. Just build up the reserve. Just work. That's all. And because I do have some elderly population people that come and see me as well. And I'm like, let's just work on sleep for the next 2 months. That's it. We'll build up the pyramid. When we've got you sleeping well and you've built all that up, let's now get you exercising. And then we can top it off. The top of the pyramid for us is nutrition.
God, thank you so much, dude. So much information. Where can people find you, all the amazing work that you're putting out?
So I'm active on Instagram, which is Louisa Nicola _. I have a podcast where I share all of this, the Neuro Experience. And if you are a trainer or a personal trainer, we have a Neuro-athletics coaching certificate that we do. Yeah, so you can find that on our website.
If you want to learn the shocking freaking root causes of Alzheimer's and daily hacks that you can use to prevent it, then keep watching. Where I want to start, I want to just jump right into something that you call bikini medicine. And I have a quote of yours that describes bikini medicine. And it's assuming that women are essentially men with breasts and tubes. Yet women are far more likely than men to suffer from anxiety, depression, migraines, brain injuries, and strokes. They are also twice as likely to end their lives suffering from Alzheimer's disease, even when their longer lifespans are taken into account. Talk to me about bikini medicine.
Yes, bikini medicine has been a big issue for me as a scientist. And bikini medicine is saying that from a medical perspective, what makes a woman is literally just those parts of the body that we can fit under a bikini or that are covered by a bikini. So our breasts, our tubes, our ovaries. And that has meant that historically, medical professionals would diagnose and treat both genders the same exact way, thinking that if I'm testing a medicine for the brain, I can just test it in a bunch of men, and whatever I find is going to apply to women as well. And the same for the heart, right? If I have a heart medication that works for men, it is just assumed that it would work the same for women. And that is completely not the case. It's just not the truth. And we know that. I mean, if you take a bunch of basic scientists or biologists, they will tell you metabolism is different. Women absorb nutrients and drugs very differently than men do. And the same drug may have completely different effects in men and women. And then you just go to discovery science, which is what I do for the most part. And there's a complete disregard for women's brains as a whole. For a very long time, women were not even included in research. And now that we do include them, we never look at women as being different from men. We just lump men and women together. And then actually we've removed the effects of sex using statistical manipulations, which is really saying, once again, even now in 2021, is really saying that women are broadly indistinguishable from men, except there's some ovaries in there.
That's so powerful, and that's where I wanted to start, because really shining the light of how important this is, and everything like I've known up until this date. Like your book really made me rethink things, and I think that's so incredible for us to just give the awareness to people first. And that's really why I wanted to start there, because I think it begins with awareness, and then like you get so tactical in your book about what you can do and how you can eat and how you can optimize your brain as a female, which we're definitely going to get into. But just to really give people the actual like hard truth about what you're saying about how medicine up until this point hasn't treated men and women differently, can you talk us through the Ambien and what happened there? Because I think that really highlights how a study can lead us women astray.
Yes, so Ambien is the most popular sleep medication, at least in the United States, but I think there are similar formulations all over the world. And the drug was mostly developed in clinical trials that included mostly men. Even the preclinical studies, because usually drugs are tested in animals first, usually it's mice or rodents. And the vast majority of preclinical studies are really focused on male animals. Female animals are not included because scientists would say that hormonal fluctuations make them too variable to study. And so they just look at the male animals and then assume that the drug that works for a male mouse will work for an actual woman, which is not the case. But long story short, women used to be given very high doses of Ambien because the doses were based on men, on men's body's ability to metabolize the drug and obtain a certain amount of efficacy, right? And then what happened, which is really bizarre, is that insurance companies started asking, what is going on with women? Why are all these women getting into car crashes? And the answer was Ambien. There were women who were taking men-derived doses of sleep medications and would literally overdose and sleepwalk throughout the day and then getting into car accidents, not because they can't drive, but because they were effectively over-medicated. And so a number of scientists really knocked on the door of the FDA and said, we have to cut down the dose, which was eventually cut in half. And now it is safe to take. But just think about all the million women who were injured or literally got in trouble for simply following guidelines that completely disregarded the woman's physiology, right? And the knowledge that their bodies just don't work the same way.
Yeah, that's when I heard you tell that story, that's so powerful because it just gives people a perspective of how what we've been taught up to this point. And now how do we shift that thinking and shift the studies that we're doing and the way that we approach it as women. And so if you can take me deeper now on the XX brain, as we like to refer to as the female brain, the XX brain, and why it's very important to understand the XX brain that is different to the XY brain.
I think it is really important to realize that their brains are just not the same. And the most important factor, in my opinion, is that women's brains don't age the same way the men's brains age. And when I say age, I'm not thinking 80s or 90s. I mean from the beginning of your life, from the moment you're born, actually even before a baby is born. Our brains are wired a little bit differently to respond to stimulation differently, whether the stimulation be hormones or enzymes or stress or just life. And the reason that this is important is that men's brains and women's brains are not different in the sense that one is better than the other. I really want to be clear about that. We're not supporting gender stereotypes. I'm not saying that, pink and blue is a thing, that girls should play with dolls and boys should be given trains. That's not the point. The point is that the way that the brain is built or the way that the brain functions really dictates different strengths and different vulnerabilities. And that is very important. We all know that women have a better verbal memory than men, for example. There are people who debate that, there are people who don't believe it, but on average across studies, women have an edge when it comes to remembering verbal information. That's a strength that is hardly ever celebrated, right? But at the same time, there's also risks that impact women's brains more, and we never talk about this. But for context, you mentioned those risks before, but I really want to clarify the magnitude of the problem. Yeah. Right. So women are twice as likely as men to be diagnosed with an anxiety disorder or depression. There are millions of people with anxiety or depression. We're 3 times more likely to develop an autoimmune condition, including those that attack the brain, like multiple sclerosis. We're 4 times more likely to suffer from migraines and headaches, as any woman knows. And we're also more likely to die of a stroke or to develop certain forms of brain tumors already in our 30s and 40s. And on top of all this, women are twice as likely as men, or almost twice as likely as men, to develop Alzheimer's disease, which is the most common form of dementia on the planet, which means that for every man with Alzheimer's disease, there are 2 women. And no one talks about it, right? When you talk about women's health or women's health issues, we're all thinking about breast cancer, That's the first thing that comes to mind, right? It has the pink ribbon, as it should.
Yeah.
But the bottom line is that a woman in her 60s is almost twice as likely to develop Alzheimer's disease in her life than she is to develop breast cancer.
That is so insane.
Incredible. It's frightening, it's scary. And we don't talk about it, right?
Why do you think that is? Like, why do you think if it's that dramatic that it hasn't become the norm discussion?
Because it has not been studied that way. So I have a family history of Alzheimer's disease that really affects the women in my family. And I always wanted to study the brain. So as soon as I was able to, I started asking questions like, is it just my family? Is it everybody? And back then, people would say to me, well, you know, after aging itself, being a woman is the most significant risk factor for developing Alzheimer's disease. However, it doesn't really matter because women live longer than men, and Alzheimer's is a disease of old age. So it's really just the women live longer. And, okay. But then you look at the numbers, and women don't live that much longer than men. Like in the United States, the difference is 4 years, not 20. In England, the difference is 2.5 years. And Alzheimer's disease or dementia is the number one cause of death only for women and not for men. So there's something more, clearly, right? And we started looking into that years ago. And long story short, we showed that, number one, not just us, but scientists show that Alzheimer's disease is not a disease of old age, but starts in midlife with negative changes to the brain that then eventually lead to the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease, the memory loss, the confusion, all those kind of issues. And midlife is any age from 35 to 65. And so it's not midlife and some fuzzy 60-year-old thing. It's like 35, 40 years old, you're middle-aged, just for clarity, just frightening.
Yeah.
But then that changed the question. My question then was, okay, if Alzheimer's disease starts in midlife, what is it that happens only to women and not to men in midlife that could potentially trigger Alzheimer's disease in a woman's brain?
Yeah.
And we show that the answer is menopause and losing your hormones, which really was very, very unexpected and changed the way that we work and that we think about prevention. So I think it's really about women's brains, not just Alzheimer's or menopause or this or that. It's more about getting a sense of the full picture.
Yeah, and look, to me, I'm always, how do I get the full picture, the accurate information so that I can then adjust accordingly, right? It's like, what life do I want? And then how do I act in my current life in order to set me up for future successes? And so when I think about how cognitively aware I want to be for my entire life, and then what are the things that I'm doing now, in not just showing up now to have clarity of mind and, you know, to have a good memory, but also for the long term. You talk about the 3 Ps. So you've got puberty, pregnancy, and then premenopausal?
Perimenopause.
Perimenopause. So can you actually take us through? So let's say you're going through puberty. What is happening to the brain there? And so that we can kind of break it down, and then we'll talk about the pregnancy part.
Yes. So during puberty is like an explosion of hormonal power, because this is really when your ovaries basically turn on and they start producing hormones that give you a menstrual cycle and also allow you to get pregnant. And that's been happening earlier on in life. At this point, some girls go through puberty when they're 11. The average age is 12. And that is a huge change, not just for the body, but also inside the brain. And you would think that all these hormones would have a sort of boosting effect on the brain, right? But when you actually do brain scans and you look at the brain of adolescents, the brain is shrinking.
As you get older.
As you get older, your brain is shrinking, even though your body is growing at that stage. And a lot of connections between neurons are discarded with a process that is called pruning. Because what happens when you're born is that your brain just shoots out neurons the whole time. And all these neurons form connections with other neurons that are called synapses. But many of these connections at some point are no longer useful because your brain can go on autopilot, right? By the time you're 12, you know how to ride a bike, you know how to tie your shoes, you know how to make your own lunch. So all those connections can go and make room for new connections. So they're mostly related to social cognition and really becoming a member of society. So you need to grow brain regions. So some brain regions shrink because they're no longer needed. Those neurons are not needed anymore. But other brain regions actually grow, like the memory center of the brain grows. The emotional center of the brain is called the amygdala. That also grows. The frontal cortex, which is in charge of judgment, planning, and reasoning, and controlling instincts and impulses, also grows a lot during adolescence.
Does that grow in a different way to then the XY brain, the male brain?
Yes. So these connections are stronger in girls, in teenage girls. They develop earlier on in life relative to boys' brains. And that has been interpreted as girls reaching maturity, intellectual maturity, a little bit earlier on than men, but also mostly about being more on top of things and like being better at judging the situation, and also being able to manage risks a little bit more effectively. And at that point, your verbal abilities are also better as a girl, language is more developed, and a few other things. And again, these differences are subtle and there's no need to overemphasize them, but it is interesting to see that the trajectory of development are a little bit different between boys and girls.
Does that have then a knock-on effect depending on then when you get as a female, when you get your period? So like if you got your period later, would your brain develop later?
Partially. So what happens with the menstrual cycle is that as the hormones change and fluctuate throughout the month, so does your brain, and so do your brain connections. So when estrogen levels are highest, which is right before ovulation, that's literally when you can see, which is incredible, you can see the synapses firing up and dendrites growing. Dendrites, so neurons look like trees a little bit, and the branches are called dendrites. You can see these branches literally growing and expanding right before ovulation, and then withdraw when your estrogen goes down before menstruation. So even throughout the menstrual cycle, the brain changes on a weekly, if not daily basis. And granted, they're not huge changes, but they are significant enough for some women to feel the change, right? So many women are intuitively aware that their mood changes throughout the menstrual cycle, that their focus is different, their energy is different. And that's in part hormonal, and in part is literally that your brain is changing along with your reproductive organs. And it's wonderful. And that is pretty much stable throughout a woman's reproductive life until you get pregnant. I think what we're missing in general is the fact that people are organisms. Because Western medicine is always about specialties. You either understand the brain or you understand the body.
Yes.
Right? I'm a brain person, and I never thought I would be talking about hormones or ovaries. And if I talk to my OBGYN colleagues, which I do daily at this point, they don't really know what to do with their brains. They don't manage brain health. They don't manage brain. They don't know how to read a brain scan. But in reality, this is a system that works as a system and changes at the same time. And whatever happens to your ovaries has an impact in your brain.
Lisa, this is why this discussion is so important, and your book is so amazing. So I've had a lot of health issues in my gut, and I've been battling them for now probably over 6 years. And when it first started happening, I had gut issues. I couldn't eat. I hadn't had a period. I was always tired, always brain fog. And every time I would go to a doctor, if I went to, the gut specialist, oh, I've got a tablet for that. But then over here, if I'd go to my, gynecologist, it was something else. And I'm like, guys, there seems like there's a connection here, and it's just like, but no one is like, they're like, oh, no one was talking to each other. And so I think it is so freaking important what you're saying, because I'm all about empowerment. How do I empower myself with knowledge so that I can approach any situation that I'm looking for with the knowledge, and then I can adjust, right? So if it's, I want to feel extremely confident today, I know that my hormones have to do with it. And I know that by looking at the cycle or where I am in my cycle, I can determine whether this is a good time for me to step up and be confident, or actually it's a time to self-soothe and relax and take it more easy. And we don't talk enough about that, because I've even heard you say it's like a freaking superpower.
Yes. Yeah, I think it's a superpower. I think if we were just educated and we had the information and the knowledge, we could really use it to our advantage. Because it's important, even just exactly what you were saying, what you said right now. How much coffee are you going to drink today? Does it matter? Did you notice that if you drink the same amount of coffee before ovulation and after ovulation, the effect is going to be completely different?
Do you mind if we dive deep in that? Because that's the sort of the stuff. So thank you for bringing that up. So you've spoken about, when it comes to optimization, there's diet, there's supplements, exercise, stress, and sleep. So I'd love to go deep into those. And then we definitely will talk about the pregnancy, because that is so important that I definitely want to make sure that we touch there. So let's talk about diet for starters.
I love talking about diet, in part because it's a very powerful tool that we have, because everybody eats every day, right? So we're all, as a society, we're comfortable with the idea that we feed our bodies, and that our diet will reflect into what kind of clothing we will wear, or a certain body weight or body type. But the truth is that the same exact foods that change your body also really impact the functionality of the brain. So the way that the body responds to stimulants changes throughout the cycle. Okay. In that, when your estradiol levels are high, which is the week before ovulation and the few days afterwards, then the stimulants would really have a good positive effect. So if your estrogen is high, you have a lot of energy, you don't need as much coffee, and you feel the effects more strongly. Okay. But in the second part of the cycle, you'll need 3 times more coffee to achieve the same level of alertness.
Whoa!
3 times is ballpark. I just mean,
still though. I mean, that's look, it's still a lot.
Yeah, it's still a lot. I mean, you'll need more. You'll need more caffeine to have the same kind of response, and that's why many women will drink too much coffee, and then you get the jitters, so you don't feel so good, that you actually feel tired because you have exceeded your threshold. So I think this is important to keep in mind. And something I like to do personally during the second half of the cycle is that I switch to cacao tea. I love coffee.
Oh, interesting.
Yes, I'm Italian, so my espresso is important to me. But sometimes if I feel like tired and there's no reason for me to be tired, then I'll be like, oh, maybe it's a specific moment of the month, and maybe I want to switch to something more gentle. Actually, just recently I was like, why do I want the cacao so much? And I think in part is the fact that it gives you more energy for longer periods of time, especially if you mix it. So caffeine and theobromine, which is the antioxidant that's found in cacao powder, they're both vasodilating nutrients. So they improve blood flow to the brain. The difference is that the half-life of caffeine is shorter, so the effect goes away a little bit faster, and also it impacts heart rate. Whereas the theobromine in raw cacao has a gentler effect that is more sustained over time, a little bit like tea. If you drink black tea, you don't get the rush of energy, but you'll be up at night if you drink it.
Yeah.
So kind of like that. And also if you mix it with something that contains a little bit of fat, like either milk, if you drink milk, or oat milk, or whatever you like that contains a bit of fat, that will slow down the release of the caffeine or the theobromine to the brain, giving you more energy over time. Yeah, which is one of the reasons that the bulletproof coffee works so well. So for women, we need to be a little bit more careful, or just a little bit more aware, especially those who do have sensitivity to stimulants. The same goes for alcohol.
That's fascinating. Are there any foods? So you mentioned like antioxidants. So is it a better time to eat like more blueberries in your cycle?
I think you want to eat even more antioxidants and iron compound, foods that contain iron and minerals towards the end of your cycle as you prepare for menstruation. But it's very depleting to have a menstrual cycle. So it's really important, I think, to replenish all the nutrients and be sure to support your body, because there's also an inflammatory component, right? And so the antioxidants that double down as anti-inflammatory nutrients are very helpful in that respect. See, there's so much more to food than just food. Food is information, and food is function. And one of the functionalities of food is that very specific nutrients can literally speak to our cells. So for example, omega-3 fatty acids, and everybody's aware that omega-3 fatty acids are good for you, they're good for your body, they're good for your brain, they're good for your heart, and mostly have anti-inflammatory capacities. And one way that they do so is that they literally speak to your DNA in your cells and tell them, and they would be like, okay, I'm here, you don't have to produce that many anti-inflammatory compounds because I'm in the circulation. Whereas if it's not present, then your DNA will know that it needs to make more anti-inflammatory enzymes to balance it out. So there's always a relationship between the foods that we eat and the way that our body needs to respond and either upgrade the production of certain things or downregulate it. I find it fascinating. And it's the same in the brain.
Yeah, I find that fascinating too. And there's just something different though about the body. It speaks to you, like, oh, my shoulder aches, right? And you're like, what did I do? And you like think about what you did. And, it's so very specific in the moment, but like the brain, even just like reading a book and understanding what we're doing now has like 30-year effect, effects on you 30 years later. Like that really becomes very enlightening, and to make sure that I'm trying to eat the right things right now. So you've said about the diet during the cycle, you mentioned omega-3. Would you suggest an omega-6, is that right? Or just 3?
Yeah, so usually we recommend a balance between omega-3s and omega-6. The point is that the typical Western diet contains a ton of omega-6 fatty acids and very little of the omega-3s. So I think it's helpful to focus on foods that contain more omega-3s and trying to eat less of those that are very high in omega-6 compounds. You want a 2-to-1 ratio, whereas the typical Western diet is a 20-to-1 ratio in favor of the omega-6, or even higher than that, because of all the oils, all the refined oils and all the peanuts and meat and whatnot. So fish is a good source of omega-3 fatty acids, fish, shellfish. You don't have to necessarily eat fish. A lot of people don't like it. Some people don't want to eat it because of environmental concerns and whatnot. So there are plant-based sources of omega-3s that are really great. I had switched from my beloved extra virgin olive oil to flax oil. So 1 tablespoon of flax oil contains almost all the omega-3s you need for the form of ALA. So you actually should have a little bit more for your brain, because ALAs are the plant-based omega-3s, but they need to be converted into DHA and EPA. And about 70% of the fat is lost in the conversion. So you actually have to eat more. So then you go for hemp seeds or flax seeds or chickpeas or legumes or something like that, some nuts and seeds, and then back to the olive oil for dinner.
Yeah, I'll do a bit of a blend. So that's Fascinating. And so if you're unable to get it from natural foods, I assume supplements is the next best thing?
Yes, I would say so. If you're concerned that your diet might be too low in these nutrients, then supplements are definitely recommended. What I would say is then supplements should not replace a healthy diet. And I find that sometimes people would much rather get the supplements than eat healthily. And that kind of defeats the purpose, right? So it's best to really focus on having a healthy diet and a diverse diet with all sorts of foods and nutrients, and supplements as a backup. I would say that would be my backup plan. Lots of patients would come to us and say, give me something, whether a supplement or something. And so we're like, well, let's do some tests first and see if your levels are actually low, because otherwise supplements don't work. They only work if they're supplementing, which means that you have to be low in the nutrients first in order for the supplement to have a benefit for you. So I think it's important to know yourself, know your numbers. I think in medicine, we're switching to a precision medicine approach where instead of treating the average person or to treat a person as a point in a regression line, we actually want to understand the person in front of us and do all the tests that we can do and understand your physiology and then interact with your physiology in a way that is helpful to you.
I think that's so important.
Yeah, because that's the thing, especially, so I've been married to my husband now for almost 20 years. And, when he's taking, vitamin D and he's taking all these supplements and originally I was just copying whatever he was doing. So everything that you're talking about is being very catered to you, I think is so spot on. So I love that. But now let's talk about exercise, because I heard you say, and it's so true, where you have, let's say, like the woman wants to like lose weight, right? And so she's like changes her diet and she goes on like these sprints and does all these exercises and like loses half a pound. And then you got the guy that just quits soda and doesn't change his exercise routine at all and then ends up losing 20 pounds. So that obviously can be very frustrating, but I think it's actually important to discuss what is happening to a female, what exercises can we do that is good for our brains. So yeah, if you can take us down that would be great.
I think that is really important. Exercise is the same as diet. There is no one size that fits all, and it's very personal. And it depends on what your goals are. If we're thinking about the brain, then what's really important is not intensity as much as consistency. This is what the research on exercise and brain health shows. Then the key is really, obviously, if you can go higher intensity and it's enjoyable to you and you can do it, good, absolutely. Nobody's going to stop you, believe me. But the problem, especially in the United States, is that people don't exercise that much to start with. And especially for women, there's a very sharp decline in the amount of time that is devoted to exercise or even just moving, just being physically active as soon as we're past college, right? Because of whatever reasons in societies and demands and growing a family and just holding a job. Women just don't make as much time for exercise as they do for other things. What is important is to make exercise a routine part of your wellness plan, right? So to speak. And it's very hard to do that. It's honestly very hard. But what the brain wants, at the minimum, it's a moderate intensity exercise. And the need for frequency ranges between 3 and 5 times a week. And most experts recommend at least 45 minutes of moderate intensity exercise 3 to 5 times a week. If you can do 5, it's better than 3. If you can do 3, it's better than none. So I think it's also important to be gentle with yourself and really understand whether or not the specific routine fits into your everyday life and make it sustainable. Women who are physically active after the age of 35 have a 30% lower risk of dementia in old age than women who are sedentary. And
30% is insane.
1 in 3. Honestly. So that is very important. If we had drugs that lowered your risk of dementia in old age by 30%, it would be FDA approved tomorrow and everybody would take it, right? Instead, we don't have it. Okay, we don't have that drug, but we can exercise. So we always recommend this to our patients. Just find the exercise routine that works for you, that you like. You need to get your heart beating faster. That is key. Yes, walking is lovely, but then walk faster. You have to challenge your cardiovascular system so that the brain can experience an increase in blood flow, more oxygen, more nutrients, more resilience, because the brain contains a huge amount of veins. Basically, the vasculature of the brain is incredible. You need to support it. And you do it by keeping your heart strong and your entire system strong. So brisk walk 5 times a week, 3 times a week, great. If you can do something more. Clinical trials of exercise have shown that some parts of your brain can actually regrow.
Oh my God.
Yeah, like the memory center of the brain, the hippocampus, actually did not show any decline in people who were walking fast. Those were elderly people who were just walking fast very often, like throughout the week. And actually, in some cases, showed a bit of a rebound.
I mean, that's so beautiful, like valuable information. So I am always looking at, how do I show up tomorrow morning, right? How do I show up today in the best way that I possibly can? If I have to look at my hormones, then amazing. If I have to look at, like, what are the things that I need to look at in order to protect my brain so that I can show up, being able to make business decisions, being able to be emotionally like sober, I like to call it, so that I can have maybe some conflicts in the day that it doesn't spill me over emotionally. Like, how do I show up to be strong and confident? Like, everything we're talking about is about the now, but then also what are the things that I can do to help the future Lisa in me that's going to get there, right? Like, the hope is that I do live long enough to be 95 years old. So what are the things? So exercise is fantastic, diet, supplement. Let's talk about stress. Stress is, we all know that, especially now these days, stress isn't good for you. It gets, it's actually causing, early heart attacks and strokes and things like that. But I've actually heard you say that stress is actually harder on females than it is on males. Can you talk to me about that? Because that was fascinating.
Yes. What happens in reality is that stress works in balance with our sex hormones. So the way that the body reacts to stress is by increasing the production of a hormone called cortisol, which is the main stress hormone. And the way that the body and the brain is able to do that is by sinking or reducing the production of your sex hormones, because they all come from the same precursor. For your brain and your body to be able to increase the production of cortisol, that means suppressing the production of sex hormones like estradiol and progesterone. When that happens, as a woman, you don't feel great because your brain is literally wired to be activated in part by the estrogen, especially the estrogen, but also the progesterone, because estrogen is an activator for the brain. It's a neuroprotective hormone that has a very boosting effect on brain energy levels. So when your cortisol goes up, your estradiol goes down and your brain suffers. And then new studies with brain scans that use brain scans to look at this relationship has shown that chronic stress, so not just acute, occasional stress, but chronic stress increases cortisol levels in a way that is quite persistent. And that really has deleterious effect on memory performance already in midlife, so starting at age 35, especially in women. And that gets worse after women go through menopause, because then the high cortisol actually correlates with brain shrinkage only in women.
Wow.
Yes, that is bad news. That is very bad news, because I don't know any woman who's not under stress. Most likely chronic stress, like you turn 35 and you're stressed out, and that is unlikely to get better unless you really put an effort and come up with strategies to reduce stress. So reducing stress doesn't just save your day, it also really saves your brain for the long term. So I think it's really important for all of us to just take a collective sigh, and just acknowledge the fact that we're all under stress and that we really need to prioritize reducing stress as a very important brain protective strategy. And I think we're all aware that well-being is a skill, right? We know that cultivating well-being is really a skill and is very much an urgent public health need, but we're not given the tools to do that. Like we have a million different tools to take care of our hair, to take care of our skin.
So true.
Right, for our bodies to look a certain way. You go to the gym, there's all sorts of contraptions available. But very little has been done for people to really have the tools to cultivate mental health and well-being. And we live in a society that consistently prioritizes productivity and just soldering on and just stuffing it up instead of de-stressing and taking time for yourself. And I think especially as women, we need to do that, because a woman has no time for herself. And men could say, well, we don't have either. Yeah, but women have less, right? And it just starts as soon as you leave school and you find a job that you're literally sandwiched between responsibilities. And there's so many expectations, and you have to work so hard just to keep your role in society and just to keep your job. You have to fight for equal rights and equal pay, and you're under stress. So we need to find solutions against stress. I really strongly believe that. I'm not good at it, by the way.
So that's the thing. Okay, so let's say everything you're saying, right, completely agree with. You agree with too, but we both know we're not great at it. So what are the things, because everyone listening, I'm sure, is thinking the same, right? It's like, oh my God, I get it. Yes, it's really detrimental, way worse than I think we ever thought it was. And so now it's like, but how do we actually monitor that and live a life, right? Where we live a life where we can get on with our lives, that we're not, like for instance, running a business and doing a show like Women of Impact. It's freaking stressful, but I love it, right? But it's filling my heart. It's my mission. It's my purpose. So I'm not going to stop it, but I recognize that stress is very detrimental to my health and how I show up and how I'm going to be at 90 years old. So what are the things that we can do just to keep an eye on that doesn't become an entire life change? Because I wish it could be everyone could do life changes. We all magically change the way that we live and we're all good and now we're managing our stress. We all know that's not a reality. So what are the things in reality, knowing all the things you have to go through, knowing all the things I have to go through, that we can do maybe on a day-to-day basis that can help alleviate that, so that we don't blink and in 5-10 years we're a big ball of stress and we can't unwind it.
Yeah, and we have no brains left. Yes.
Yeah.
I think the best answers are exercise, sleep, meditation. These are really the most effective things that one can do. Diet is also effective, I think, but exercise is a must. Exercise boosts your endorphins, reduces inflammation, and blunts your response to stress. It makes you better at responding to stress. So exercise is a big deal. I think actually in that case, yoga or that kind of mind-body techniques would also be really helpful if it's your thing. For me, it really helps. I have a hard time sitting still, and I had to sit a lot. So when I'm able to move, I'd rather do something fast, like running, or I actually invested in a small elliptical machine that I can keep literally next door. So whenever I'm in a meeting that I don't have to have video on for, I'll just be on the elliptical or going for walks if you can. Being in nature, actually, being in nature has been shown to have wonderful effects on stress levels. My daughter is very outdoorsy. And so weekends we try to go for walks, and we have a little forest nearby that she likes to go to. That is very nice. And another thing is really meditation. And I do encourage meditation for kids as well. Like my daughter meditates with me at night. We have these little meditations for children. There's an app that I really like, that she loves, and little stories. But that really has changed my life. So, as you know, I would just recommend Jack Kornfield I don't know if you're familiar with.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
he's fantastic. And meditations for beginners, they're guided meditations. And just his voice is just so soothing and so real. Like he really walks his talk. That I really enjoy that. And then he wrote books, and there are other people who do this kind of work, and it's very, very helpful. And meditation is like exercise. You need to find the kind of meditation that really works for you.
Yeah.
So for me, it's insight meditation or mindfulness meditation, but there's so many other options. And there are people who like to do that with apps. I personally don't, except for my child, but there are a ton of apps that can really help.
It's the same as sleep. Sleep kind of got the bad rap in the sense of like, oh, well, that's the thing you can skip. That's the thing you don't have to focus on. Talk to me about actually the impact of sleep on our brains.
And sleep is really like one of the last frontiers in a way, because we now understand the importance of sleep for brain health. There are many different things that happen during sleep. One that is very important is that the brain is able to reduce inflammation when we're sleeping. And the other one is that it's literally the only chance that the brain has to take care of itself. So sleep is me time for the brain. And sleep goes in cycles, right? There are different phases of sleep that start with, when you're just falling asleep, there's sleepiness, you start having dreams, but then you go through a phase where you have no dreams, so your body's completely still. And that is the slow wave sleep phase, or the deep sleep phase, that is followed by REM sleep, when we have dreams. But that phase, when we're completely still and the brain is not dreaming, is actually the crucial component of sleep in terms of health and well-being, because that is really when the brain activates. It's like the brain is your mom and says, okay, the kids are down for the night. I can take a shower. I just can take care of myself. And literally the brain is like, oh, everybody's quiet. The house is quiet. I'm going to turn on this new system, the lymphatic system, that is like a dishwasher. There's literally jets of water, of fluid that open up in the brain and remove, it's like power wash your brain, so that all the toxins, all the impurities, all the waste products, even Alzheimer's plaques are removed then. Because when we're awake and we're moving, we're doing stuff, there are these microglial cells in the brain that just pick up all these bits and pieces that need to be getting rid of. And if you're not getting that phase of your sleep, then you're going to miss out on a huge opportunity for the brain to really heal itself.
That's amazing. Have you noticed then a correlation between a cognitive decline and people getting less and less rest?
Yes. Actually, there's strong evidence that sleep deprivation, or even just fragmented sleep, when you keep waking up multiple times at night, is associated with the development of Alzheimer's disease in the brain already in the 50s. And it's not just Alzheimer's disease, there's also inflammation. There's basically, I think that when it comes to lifestyle, I think what we're understanding is that if you don't have a healthy lifestyle, you're enabling all your risks to become actual medical issues in a way. Whereas if you have a strong, healthy lifestyle, you're effectively reducing this risk and keeping the risks under control almost on a daily basis. So it's a preventative in that respect, that you're really avoiding issues and you're keeping your genes at bay in a way.
I love that. Okay, I'm going to ask you a really hard question right now. It may be easy for you though, I don't know. So I live my health issues, but I have lived a very healthy lifestyle. With the health issues, I've definitely changed my life. I've changed the way that I eat. I changed my lifestyle, like everything, the way I sleep, everything. But I've chosen to not have children. And I've heard you say in your book, where you break down, so we, going back to the subject we were saying earlier about how pregnancy, like the 3 Ps, right? The puberty and the pregnancy, and at the pregnancy, whether you've had a baby or whether you've gone through those hormonal changes or not, actually has an effect on your future brain and Alzheimer's and things like that. So I literally, as I was reading your book, I was like, I really wanted to know the answer, and you can be very honest with me, but is not having children a possible detriment to my brain health as I age?
No. Our research and other people's research have shown that women who have children have a little bit more protection against Alzheimer's disease as compared to women who don't have children, and women who have more than 5. But it's not universal. What I want to clarify, that this is observational. This is just a correlation. You know, it's not that you need to have a kid tomorrow. No, absolutely not. there are challenges, you know, I totally get it that you'd rather not.
But what is happening then in your brain that makes a difference?
I think it increases plasticity. Having children, so what the research shows is that as women go through pregnancy and especially postpartum, that's really when your brain changes the most in your entire life and the fastest. And it changes in ways that are very complicated, and we're just starting to really understand. But just so far, what we know is that your brain shrinks when you're pregnant, and perhaps shrinks even more right after the baby is born, but in a way that is very similar to puberty. So it's considered an optimization, in that I like to talk about pregnancy as a system upgrade, as if the brain is a computer and you had an upgrade during puberty, and now you're having another upgrade during pregnancy, because once your baby is born, that's it. You know, if you were the most important person in the room, you can forget about it. Now, everything, your job, as Mother Nature intended it, is to make sure that human being survives. Right. And that means that a lot of connections in your brain are going to have to be rewired to stimulate your maternal instincts and stimulate your ability to really respond to the requests of a creature who can't speak, who can't move for a long time. And so what people say is that what scientists have shown is that you basically do lose connections in some parts of the brain. You lose neurons, but your connectivity gets stronger in certain parts of the brain that are preparing you for motherhood. So your brain is going through a rewiring and a remodeling that seems to be helpful, in that plasticity is stimulated. So your brain becomes more plastic, and that seems to give an advantage for the long term as well. Now, if you don't get pregnant, your brain is fine. You know, actually, you're avoiding this turmoil that needs to happen. So I think this is just one factor that is so specifically unique to women. Obviously, men can't have children, right? So this is a mechanism, it's a biological mechanism that has evolved to support motherhood. And the vast majority of people see that as being adaptive, even though you have the mommy brain, even though you have brain fog, even though, like, I found myself literally knocking on the door of the fridge before opening the fridge. I'm very polite, you know, I would just open the door. So it's just knocking and waiting. And then my husband's like,
So that's the thing though, but that's what I process, right? Is that I'm not going to have a child just so that I can create brain plasticity, but I do look at this stuff, and I don't think that that's a bad thing. Like, if you were like, yes, Lisa, you know, they do have the edge, which you said, right? They do have the edge. So then I go to, now how do I create brain plasticity myself without having a child? Because I just go to, if they're facts, there are facts. And now just being aware of it allows me to think outside the box. So for instance, with something like, is there something that I can do, like a test or anything that I could do to help me gain brain plasticity without actually having to have a child?
Having kids is just one factor. There's a million factors. Women who develop or go through puberty earlier on in life and go through menopause later in life, so those with the longest reproductive span, they also have an edge, right? Their brains also have more plasticity because you've had more of these hormones in your body for a longer period of time. So that's another factor. Yeah. Or whether or not you took hormones throughout your life, whether or not you took like birth control, or whether or not you're going to have to take estradiol for symptoms of menopause. Those also are factors that that are just as important. Your diet is important. Your fitness is important. How much sleep you get per night is important. Your happiness is important. Your positive outlook on life is important. You don't have to have children to protect your brain. It's just one component to brain health. And the reason we were looking into it is because we're interested in hormones and how hormones impact the brain.
Yeah, like I said, I wouldn't have a baby for that reason, but I'm such a person that, like, I want to have the knowledge no matter what that means. So when I heard you say about the benefits of brain plasticity when you have kids, the first thing that came to mind was, oh, am I now a step behind? And I don't mind if I am. It's kind of like, I just want to know the truth so that I can then plan for, like, all right, what else can I do to mitigate this?
So right. I don't think you should worry at all. These studies are descriptive, and I think they're important because hopefully they will stimulate more research.
Right.
Because there's very little research done on pregnancy and the long-term effects of pregnancy on the brain. All we know is what happens basically when you're pregnant and, like, within 2 years.
That's interesting.
Baby. There's very little work done to associate that with anything else later in life. So I think it's just a process of a better understanding our brains and how to keep them healthy. And I think lifestyle is incredibly important. We see that at the clinic all the time, that when people really comply with the guidelines and recommendations that they're given, their memory improves, their attention improves, their overall health really improves. And for some women, taking hormones may be helpful. So there are many different strategies, and I think that the approach should be individualized.
Women are more likely to get Alzheimer's and dementia than men. If you want to find out why, click here right now.
That if you are blessed to live to 85 or older, you have a 1 in 2 chance of having dementia.